one said no or should. Okay, thank you very much. Can we bring Lieutenant Ray in, please?
Michelle said the other chief of court and during the case down here, and she the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Good morning. Okay, whenever you're ready, Mr. Lally.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, sir.
Morning, sir.
Picking up where we left off yesterday afternoon, Lieutenant, Ms. Gilman, if I could have Exhibit 41 back up on the screen. And Lieutenant, so we're about 2 hours, 10 minutes, and 58 seconds into this particular cruiser video. With respect to this video, if you could just remind the jury where we are and what we're looking at here.
This is 1 Meadows Ave, Canton, Mass., John O'Keefe's residence.
And Ms. Gilman, if you could hit play at this point. Now, Lieutenant Ray, while this is up on the screen, if I could ask you to, you've reviewed this video since this date of January 29, 2022, correct?
Yes.
And using the laser pointer in front of you, if you could direct the jury's attention to what, if anything, you noted in regard to the rear area of the vehicle in front of your cruiser.
This vehicle right here is Miss Reed's vehicle. I believe that vehicle there is Mr. O'Keefe's vehicle. And I didn't, although I didn't know it at the time, but I have since reviewed.
Move to strike.
So let him finish his, you didn't know it at the time, but you have since what?
I have since reviewed this video, and I can tell that there is a.
Okay, the objection sustained.
Continue.
Now, during the course of
No, he's got to ask the question differently.
during the course of your well-being check, where is it around the residence that you know?
We initially went up to one of the front doors. I believe it was the one on the right. And we rang the doorbell, knocked on the door, and was seeing if we could raise anybody and get any response.
And during the time that you were there, were you able to raise anybody and get any response?
No, sir.
And at some point subsequent to this, what, if anything, did you learn as to the whereabouts of the children at the time that you were at the residence at 8:23, approximately a.m.?
After we left and we weren't able to raise anybody, shortly thereafter, subsequently we did find out that the children were staying with friends or family at this time.
And Lieutenant, if you know, approximately how long were you at the residence doing this well-being check?
5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes.
Ms. Gilman, if I could ask you to just bring the video forward to about 2 hours, 16 minutes, and 30 seconds. You can stop it there, Ms. Gilman. Thank you very much. Now, with reference to that driveway area that was in front of your vehicle when you parked there, what, if anything, beyond sort of snow, ice, or things like that did you note within the driveway itself?
Within the driveway itself, I noticed there was 2 vehicles in the driveway.
Anything on the ground that you noted that didn't, anything on the ground beyond snow, did you know?
No, sir.
Your Honor, may I have just one moment?
Sure.
Now, sir, with reference to the residents of One Meadows Ave, are you familiar with there being a security system or a ring video system at that residence?
Yes, there is a Ring camera system at that residence.
And subsequently to this date, have you seen that ring video?
Yes.
Ms. Gilman, if I could have Exhibit 6. If I could have video 159. Ms. Gilman, if I could ask you to just... Now, Lieutenant Ray, what's up on the screen? Do you recognize that?
Yes.
And what do you recognize that to be?
Recognize that to be the driveway of One Meadows Ave, and myself and Sergeant Lehan exiting our cruiser while in the driveway.
And Ms. Gilman, if you could just play it through from there, please. Ms. Gilman, if I could have the next video, 160. If you could just pause it for just a moment. Now, again, what's up on the screen, Lieutenant, do you recognize that?
Yes.
What do you recognize it to be?
That's me entering, exiting the front of the residence, walking towards the driveway.
Ms. Gilman, if you could play through. Ms. Gilman, could I have Exhibit 5? And from that, could I have video number 18? And if you could just pause it there. Lieutenant, do you recognize what's depicted up on the screen now?
Yes.
What do you recognize that to be?
One of the front doors to Mr. O'Keefe's house, and I'm entering the frame on the left.
And Ms. Gilman, if you could run it. Thank you. Ms. Gilman, if I could have the next video, 19. Pause it there, Ms. Gilman. Now, again, in addition to going to the front door and sort of in the driveway area, where, if anywhere, are you going in this video now?
It looks like I'm heading towards this vantage point to the right, which if you're looking at the house from the front would be the left, to see if there's anything in plain view through the windows, if I could see anybody, any persons, any activity.
Ms. Gilman, if you could press play. Thank you, Ms. Gilman. You can take that down, Mr. Officer, if we could have excuse me, if we could have the lights back on, Mr. Officer. Thank you. And Lieutenant Ray, just lastly, once you left the residence of One Meadows Ave, where did you go from there?
I believe we went back to the police station.
Just one moment, Your Honor.
Yes.
I have no further questions for this witness, Your Honor.
Okay. Mr. Yannetti?
The defense has no questions.
Okay. You are all set, sir.
Thank you.
Your next witness, Mr. Lally?
Yes, Your Honor. The Commonwealth call Mr. Michael Camarano to the stand. Your Honor, if I may, while the witness is coming in, may we approach this
Sure.
procedural thing?
and raise your right hand. You solemnly swear the understatement of the court and jury in the case now in hearing the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. I do. Thank you. Just need you to really speak loudly into that microphone. Thank you.
Whenever you're ready, Mr. Lally.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Could you please state your name and spell your last name for the jury?
Michael Camarano, Camerano,
And where do you live, sir?
292 Mechanic Street in Canton.
So I'm going to ask you to keep your voice up, please, okay?
And, sir, if you want that microphone's adjusted, around to whatever's comfortable, okay? And how long have you lived in Canton?
18 years.
And that residence you live at, who, if anyone, do you live there with?
My wife and 2 children,
And what's your wife's name?
Catherine,
And how old are your 2 children?
16 and 13.
And the 16-year-old, is that a boy or a girl?
Girl,
And your other child, is that a boy or a girl?
boy,
Now, your wife, how long have you, the 2 of you been married?
25 years.
And do you work, sir?
Yes.
What is it that you do for work?
Labor's union.
And does your wife work as well?
Correct.
And what does she do?
She's a nurse.
Now, sir, if I could turn your attention to January 28th, 2022. Do you recall that date, sir?
Yes.
And were you working that day?
Yes.
And do you recall what day of the week that was?
Friday.
And following work, what did you do after work?
I went home, did some stuff with the kids.
And during the time that you were home, who, if anyone, did you speak with, either via phone, text?
I was talking to John O'Keefe.
And with regard to John O'Keefe, how did you know John O'Keefe?
I met John 7 years ago.
And how was it that the 2 of you met?
We met through mutual friends, and then our kids became very friendly.
And the mutual friends through whom you met, who were they?
The Robertses,
And what are their first names?
Kurt and Kerry.
And starting with Kurt Roberts, how do you know Kurt Roberts?
I grew up with Kurt.
Where did the 2 of you grow up?
Milton?
So you've known Kurt Roberts most of your life, is that correct?
Correct.
And you mentioned that, so you have 2 children. How many children did Mr. O'Keefe have?
2.
And those 2 children, as far as their ages and genders, what were they in relation to your 2 children?
Same.
So 16-year-old girl,
13-year-old son. Yes.
and were each of your 2 children friends with Mr. O'Keefe's niece and nephew?
Correct.
Now, as far as friends were concerned, starting with your children and Mr. O'Keefe's niece and nephew, how close friends were they?
My daughter was very extremely close.
And extremely close with John
Kaylee.
O'Keefe's niece, Kaylee?
Yeah. Yeah.
And with reference to your son and John O'Keefe's nephew, Patrick, what was sort of the nature of their relationship?
They were close also.
And as far as activities, what, if any, sort of activities did your kids do with Patrick and Kaylee?
Patrick and Michael played baseball together. Kaylee and Madeline played basketball. Soccer also.
And John O'Keefe, how would you describe your relationship with John O'Keefe?
We were close. We did a lot of stuff together. Pick up the kids, drop the kids off. We coordinated a lot of stuff together. We're friends.
And your residence versus, you're familiar with where Mr. O'Keefe lived, correct?
Yes.
Where did he live?
Meadows Ave.
And about how far away is Meadows Ave from where you live?
5 minutes.
Now, with regard to the girls, and by that I mean your daughter and John O'Keefe's niece, Kaylee. What, if anything, was going on with them on that particular day?
They both received acceptance letters to go to school.
And which school was that? Sir?
Bishop Fan?
Is that a private school?
Yes.
So at the time of this, in January 28th, 2022, what grade was your daughter and Kaylee Furbush?
8th grade.
And so this would have been going into 9th grade or high school, is that right?
Correct.
And what, if any, conversation did you have with Mr. O'Keefe in reference to that at some point in the afternoon?
We were both excited. They both received acceptance letters, and we wanted to get the kids together.
May I approach?
Yes.
I'm directing your attention.
Show counsel.
I'm showing you the document
Okay.
just as far as specifically with reference to page, starting on page 188 of that document. If you could just look at that briefly and look up when you've been.
So I'm going to instruct the jury on this. These are text messages, right? All right, so folks, before you consider any electronic communications in your deliberations, you must first find that it's more likely true than not that the person who authored or sent these messages is this witness and/or John O'Keefe. If you do not find that it's more likely true than not that the messages were sent or authored by Mr. Camarano or Mr. O'Keefe, then you may not consider the electronic communication in deciding this case. Okay? Go ahead, Mr. Lally.
May I approach this briefly again?
Yes.
Well, I'm sorry. Before I do that, Mr. Camarano, do you recognize what's depicted on that page that I just showed you?
Yes.
And what do you recognize it to be?
Text messages?
And those text messages that you had back and forth with Mr. O'Keefe on that date of January 28th?
Correct.
Your Honor, the call will proceed to introduce and admit the book essentially as a length exhibit.
Hey, is there any objection?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Camarano, bring your attention back to page 187 of that document. Do you see anything in there listing sort of participants in a text communication or conversation? On the bottom of the page.
Yes.
And as far as who are sort of listed as the participants in that conversation that comes to follow on the next page? Sorry, sir, just from page 187. From
My wife?
your wife and who, if anyone else?
John?
And your wife, John, and is your number there as well? Sorry, you have to keep.
Correct.
So essentially, that's a conversation between yourself, your wife, Catherine, and John O'Keefe, correct?
Correct.
Now, beyond sort of your memory of that, as far as the numbers that are associated with those names, do you recognize any of those numbers as being yours, your wife's, and John O'Keefe's?
No, there's just 3 numbers there.
Now, sir, if I could ask you to flip the page to the next one, 188. Your Honor, with the court's permission, may Ms. Gilman publish this for the jury to read as well?
Yes.
Ms. Gilman, if you could go to page 188. I'm sorry, Ms. Gilman, if you could just, thank you. Read my mind. So, sir, what's up on the screen right now, is that what you have before you as page 188 of exhibits, I believe it's 48?
Yes,
What's up on the screen, is that what you have before you?
correct.
Okay. And as far as, from these conversations, there are blue bubbles and green bubbles, is that correct?
Correct.
And if you can tell from the content or from anything else on the page before you, who was communicating in the blue bubble and who was communicating in the green?
Katie, my wife?
From within.
Oh,
the
no,
bubble.
I'm communicating. Sorry, excuse me.
So there's a from and a to, is that
Yes.
correct?
Correct.
And so the sender would be in the from, is that your understanding?
Yes,
So this first one on the top of page 188, this is from you, is that correct?
correct.
What, if anything, did you say in this conversation?
Congrats, this is great news.
And what, if anything, are you referring to by that?
Kaylee getting her acceptance letter.
And Ms. Gilman, if you could just scroll down. And the next bubble, who is that from and what does it say?
It's from me. Yes, we did.
And if you could continue to scroll down, Ms. Gilman. And again, from this bubble, who is this from and what does it say?
It's from John. Same news, I hope.
Is that still in reference to the news regarding theme?
Correct.
And Ms. Gilman, if you could scroll down. Yeah. And again, sir, the next bubble, who is it from and what does it say?
It's from me. Yes.
Ms. Gilman, if you could. The next green bubble, what, if anything, does that say? And who is it from?
From John. Sweet. Congrats, Madeline.
And that's your daughter's name?
Correct.
And if you could continue to scroll down, Ms. Gilman. And again, the next bubble, who is it from and what does it say?
It's from my wife. I'm so excited for these girls. Madeline doesn't know yet.
Ms. Gilman, if you could continue down. And again, the next bubble, who is it from and what does it say?
From JJ.
And
Well, I told Kaylee already, so I'm sure she's texted her by now. Poor kid is probably a nervous wreck.
Ms. Gilman, if you could. And the next bubble,
I know.
and who is that from?
It's from my wife, Kate.
And if you could scroll down again, Ms. Gilman. And the next bubble, sir.
From me, I am sure she is freaking out.
And if you could scroll down again, please. And the next bubble, sir, who is it from and what does it say?
From John. No doubt.
And if you could scroll down again, Ms. Gilman. Thank you. Now, sir, if I could, may I approach on just a,
Yes. Do we need the lights on?
I don't,
Mr. Camarano, are you able to see without these lights on?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
so, sir, I'm going to direct your attention to, within the same exhibits, page 156. So just before we get to that, on this particular day, January 28th, 2022, where was your wife that day?
She was at home,
And at some point, did she go to work on the 28th?
correct.
Okay. And what is sort of her typical work schedule with reference to, at that time, what was her sort of typical work schedule with reference to weekends?
She worked weekend nights, her shift.
And as far as your typical schedule on Friday evenings, what, if anything, was it that you would typically do?
Friday, I would be with the kids. I would, get them ready for stuff for the weekend, take care of all the activity that we have.
And then in reference to that, as far as the weekends were concerned, or Friday evenings in particular, what, if any, sort of usual thing would you do with reference to Mr. O'Keefe?
I would usually go over the O'Keefe's house every Friday.
And with your children, is that correct?
Correct, with at least one of them, if not both of them.
So either your son's hanging out with Patrick or your daughter's hanging out with Kaylee, typically on a Friday, correct?
Correct.
Now, with reference to what you have before you as page 156 of this exhibit, again, towards the bottom, is there an indication as to a conversation starting on the next page as far as who, if anyone, the participants are?
What are you asking?
May I approach on?
Yes.
So what I want to direct your attention to is the bottom of page 156 here, as far as that box at the bottom. What, if anything, does that indicate as far as the participants in the conversation that continues or begins on the next page?
Myself and John?
And sir, if I could ask you to flip the page over to page 157. And Your Honor, with court's permission, could I publish this part of the conversation for the jury?
Yes. There's no objection, Mr. Jackson, right?
No objection.
Your Honor, for the record, we're going from page 156 to page 159. And so, Mr. Camarano, again, what's up on the screen, is that what you have before you as page 157?
Correct.
And you can look at either, whether it's the book in front of you,
Okay.
or if it's easier to see the screen, either is fine. But with reference to what's up on the screen, that first bubble, as if you could indicate to the jury again who it's from and what does it say?
It's from JJ. How did Kara do, by the way?
And who is Karen?
I don't know.
Fair enough. Now, with reference, Ms. Gilman, if you could scroll down. And the next bubble again. I'm sorry. May I?
Ted, take the screen down, please, Ms. Gilman. Turn on the lights, please. Thank you.
May I have just a moment with counsel?
Sure.
Okay.
May I approach this to retrieve the exhibit?
Yes.
And
Yes.
just for the record, Your Honor, I would ask at this point to strike whatever, I don't think there was a whole lot done on that page, but whatever that was did not seem
Yes,
to be
it was an I don't know answer, so.
thank you.
Yeah. So jurors, disregard that last question and answer.
My apologies. Directing your attention, Mr. Camarano, to what's on 157 before you, is that what's up on the screen now?
Yes.
And so my apologies for the floor. But with regard to this first bubble on page 157, who is it from and what is it?
From JJ. You guys around tonight?
Ms. Gilman, if you could scroll down. And with respect to that next blue bubble, who is it from and what does it say?
From me. Kate is working. I'm around. Madeline Michael is going to the Loose to play with a friend.
And what is the loose play?
The Luce is a elementary school.
Was there a play
The,
or something happening?
there's a park down there, activities for kids.
And Ms. Gilman, if you could scroll down to the next level. And again, who is it from and what does it say, sir?
From JJ. Okay. At the driveway with her now. I'll text on my way back.
And could that be at the doctor's?
Could be.
And Ms. Gilman, if you could scroll down to the next level. And again, who is it from and what does it say?
Oh, Don. From me to JJ, everything okay?
And if you could, down to the next level, Ms. Gilman. And again, who is it from and what does it say?
From JJ. Yes, stupid shit.
And if you could scroll down to the next level, Ms. Gilman. Again, fair to say that one's blank? Yes. So as far as no text, but may have been something.
Yeah. And go back to the microphone or,
So Ms. Camarano, the next level has no text to it, is that correct?
Correct.
and now you can move out of the way. I just wanted that question.
Absolutely. The next level below that green one, again, who is it from and what does it say, sir?
From Johnny. Just told Dr. Jin that they both got into fiend.
And if you could scroll down to the next bubble. And again, green bubble, who is it from and what does it say, sir?
From Johnny. Want to drop Madeline off and hit the hillside for a bit.
And what is a hillside, sir?
It's a pub.
And where is it located?
Canton.
And Ms. Gilman, if you could scroll down again. And the blue bubble on the screen, who is that from and what does it say?
From me to Johnny. I probably won't get to your house till 5:30.
Ms. Gilman, if you could scroll down again. Again, that green bubble, who is it from and what does it say?
From Johnny. Okay.
Ms. Gilman, if you could scroll down again. And again, the blue bubble on the screen, who is it from and what does it say?
From me. I am leaving in 10.
And if you could scroll down again.
Johnny. Okay.
Hold on 1 second, sir. Just the noise. Okay.
Okay, sir. And the next screen bubble,
Could you answer again, please?
Yes. From JJ. Okay.
Thank you.
and Ms. Gilman, if you could scroll down one last time, and that's, thank you. Ms. Gilman, you can take that. Your Honor, may I approach just to retrieve?
Yes.
You're welcome.
Mr. Camarano, with regard to your statement in the text as far as leaving now, where were you leaving and where were you going to?
Leaving my house, going to John's house.
And who, if anyone, was going with you at that time?
My daughter.
And if you know approximately what time did you arrive at Mr. O'Keefe's house?
I don't.
Now, through your friendship with Mr. O'Keefe, did you become familiar with a person named Karen Reed?
Yes.
And how did you become familiar with her, and who, if anyone, was she to Mr. O'Keefe as far as you?
John introduced me to her. She was John's girlfriend.
And just to be clear, do you see Ms. Reed in the courtroom today?
Yes.
Could you just identify as to where she's seated or an article of clothing that she's wearing?
She's sitting right there.
No, just ask the record to reflect identification and identify the witness.
Yes.
Now, with regard to Ms. Reed, prior to that date of January 28, 2022, how long had you known Ms. Reed?
Year?
Do you recall approximately when you met her?
No.
And as far as you were aware, where Mr. O'Keefe lived, did Ms. Reed live there as well?
Yes, not full-time.
So she had a house of her own as far as you knew?
Correct.
And about how often on a given week would you see Mr. O'Keefe?
Couple times.
And about how often would you see Ms. Reed?
I would see her also.
Now, as far as your relationship with Mr. O'Keefe and or Ms. Reed, would there be occasions where you would see Mr. O'Keefe without Ms. Reed?
Correct, yes.
And would there be any occasion where you would see Ms. Reed without Mr. O'Keefe?
Yes.
And where would that be?
At the house, maybe at Fields.
Now, with reference to their relationship, what, if any, conversation did you have with Mr. O'Keefe in regard to his relationship with Ms. Reed?
Objection.
Sustain, we need a time frame.
In the time period around, say, the weeks leading up to January 28, 2022, what, if any, conversation do you recall having with Mr. O'Keefe in regard to his relationship with Ms. Reed?
Just regular guy conversations.
Anything specific that you can recall?
No.
Now, when you arrived at the house, or typically when you would come over to Mr. O'Keefe's house, where is it that you would park?
In the driveway, to the right.
And is that what you did on this particular day?
Yes.
Now, when you arrived at the house, where did you go?
Into the house.
Yourself and your daughter?
Yes.
And when you got in there, who, if anyone, was at the house at that time?
Kaylee and John.
And what is it that you did, or what is it that occurred while you were in the house?
Excuse me?
What happened in the house?
We were just congratulating the girls, talking about how good it's going to be, different school, and just really excited for the girls.
And at some point, did yourself and Mr. O'Keefe make plans to leave the house?
Yes.
And where did you go?
We went down to McCarthy's.
And is that CF McCarthy's?
Correct.
Is that an establishment? Where is that?
It's in Canton Center.
And about how far away from Mr. O'Keefe's house is that?
5-10 minutes.
And is that somewhere that you're familiar with? You've been before?
Not frequently, no.
Now, with regard to, you know approximately what time you left Mr. O'Keefe's house and went to CF McCarthy's?
I don't.
And where were the girls when the two of you went to CF McCarthy's?
They were in the house.
And at the time that you left there and went to CF McCarthy's, who, if anyone else, were there any plans as far as meeting anybody else there?
I'm supposed to meet Karen.
Now, prior to leaving the house, what, if anything, did you or Mr. O'Keefe do with reference to the vehicles that were in the driveway?
So when we were leaving the house, I was parked in the driveway. John was parked on the left side of the driveway. John asked me to, I backed up so John could move his car out of the way so Karen could pull her car into the garage because of the snowstorm.
I'm sorry, you said because of the what now?
Snowstorm?
And as far as the snowstorm was concerned, what, if anything, did you know at that point in regard to that?
We were supposed to get a lot of snow.
I may have just one moment, Your Honor.
Yes.
just trying to remember which is which. With the court's permission, I would ask that Ms. Gilman be allowed to publish a part of Exhibit 6, which is the driveway of the ring video.
Okay.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could ask for video number 145. I'm sorry, if you could pause it right there. Mr. Camarano, do you recognize what's up on the screen?
Yes,
And what do you recognize that to be?
myself and my daughter.
And as far as, may I approach the witness again, Your Honor?
Yes.
So just before you hear, this is a laser pointer, if you just press that button.
Okay.
point it.
Okay?
And Ms. Camarano, using that laser pointer that you now have with you, if you could direct the jury's attention to where in this video you observe yourself and your daughter. And there are two vehicles in this sort of frame, is that correct?
Yes.
And if you could, using the laser pointer, just describe to the jury whose car is who and where it is.
The white car is mine. The SUV is John's.
The ring system that Mr. O'Keefe had at his house at this time, as far as your knowledge of it, what, if anything, would the two of you do with reference to sort of picking up or dropping off kids in the ring video?
Yes, he had a camera, so like I'd always wave or give him, I always knew that he was like watching.
And do you know how he was watching if he wasn't home?
Yes, on his phone?
So would that be sort of a running joke between the two of you?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Gilman, if you could play this. Ms. Gilman, if you could just pause it there briefly. Now, Mr. Camarano, you're familiar with Mr. O'Keefe's house. You've been there plenty of times, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And with reference to sort of where you and your daughter sort of exited from the screen, what, if any, sort of entrances to the home are located in that area?
2 garage doors.
And are you familiar with that garage area?
Yes.
Is that typically how you would enter the house?
Yes.
And with regard to sort of the condition of the garage, was Mr. O'Keefe particular about that?
Yes. He was.
And how so?
He always kept things very tight. He was like OCD.
And so as far as how many garage doors, as far as, and what I mean by garage doors is sort of electronic up, up and
So there's
down.
2 garage doors that go up and down, and there's a door. Just a single entry door.
On the left, as far as the left door.
There was an old classic car he had, convertible.
And then as far as the right door,
Was empty.
and once, beyond those sort of bay doors that go up and down, what, if any, other entranceway into the garage was there?
There's a side door.
And if you recall, when you were entering at that time on 28th with your daughter, how did you enter it?
We went to the garage door, electric door.
And was that something, what, if anything, was affixed to those garage doors as far as security was concerned, beyond the
A keypad. We'd have to punch in a key.
And at the time, or at any time, were you familiar with what that passcode was?
Yes.
Now, when you walk into the garage, how is it that you get from the garage to the house?
You walk into the garage and you walk up 3 steps and you go into a door.
And then once you sort of walk up the 3 steps and go into the door, what part of the house are you in when you enter?
You pretty much in the kitchen.
And you mentioned that Mr. O'Keefe was meticulous, if not OCD, when it came to the garage. How did that relate to how he kept the house?
The same. Everything was very tidy. When you walked in the door into the house, to the left, you put your shoes, your coats would be hung there.
And as far as shoes were concerned, is that something that you wore inside the house or not?
He'd rather you not.
And that was pretty well known to people that had been there before, correct?
Yes.
Now, Ms. Gilman, from the same exhibit, if I could, actually, I'm sorry. Your Honor, with regard to the next video that's not contained on this Exhibit 5 from the same video, I would offer that at this time as the next exhibit.
And there was no objection, Mr. Jackson?
No objection.
Okay.
Exhibit 49.
Thank you.
Your Honor, for the record, this would relate to Exhibit 6, and it's video number 148. And Ms. With the court's permission, may I publish that to the jury at this time, Your Honor?
Yes.
And what was just up on the video, sir, it's just up on the screen as video number 148. That was what you had testified to previously as far as moving the cars.
Correct.
And why was that again?
So Karen could pull in the driveway, in the garage, excuse me.
So the expectation, from your understanding, is that Ms. Reed was coming back to the house at Meadows later on that evening.
Correct.
Now, as Mr. O'Keefe from that video on the screen there was walking to the car, did you happen to notice how he was dressed?
Yes.
And as far as what you observed in that video, what you recall from that evening, is that how he was dressed that evening?
Yes.
And when I say how he was dressed, for sort of the entirety of the time that you were with him?
Yes.
So it's January 28th. You recall, you indicated there was a snowstorm coming. It was cold out, is that correct?
Correct.
And with reference to that, was Mr. O'Keefe someone that would typically wear a coat?
No.
And ever? That you can recall?
Never that I could recall.
And Your Honor, with the court's permission, with reference to that same Exhibit 6, if I could publish video number 149.
Okay.
And Ms. Gilman, for the sake of time, you can start. And yes, you can break it down. So from that video, Mr. Camarano, what is it that you and Mr. O'Keefe are doing in that video?
Heading down to McCarthy's.
Now,
Do you want the lights on, Mr. Lally?
Yes.
Thank you.
Now, at some point after you arrive at C.F. McCarthy's, who, if anyone else, sort of joins your group?
Kurt?
And that'd be Kurt Roberts, is that
Correct.
And how was it that he came to C.F. McCarthy's that night, if you know?
I texted him.
And in general terms, what do you call sort of what that text communication was like between yourself and Mr. Roberts?
Yes, he said he was busy. He was doing something that I texted him that he was a pussy.
And following that text, did Mr. Roberts eventually arrive at C.F. McCarthy's?
He showed up, yes.
And about how long after you and Mr. O'Keefe arrived did Kurt show up?
I would like to say maybe an hour.
And if you know, when was it that at some point you indicated Miss Reed appeared at C.F. McCarthy's as well?
Correct.
And do you know about how long after yourself and John arrived that Miss Reed appeared?
I don't. Exact.
Now, with reference to that establishment of C.F. McCarthy's, are you aware, or have you become aware that there was surveillance video from inside the bar that night?
Yes.
And you've seen some of that footage, is that correct?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
I'll want to seek to introduce and admit the surveillance video from C.F. McCarthy's as the next exhibit.
And there's no objection, Mr. Jackson?
There's none.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Full reporter?
Tori, 55 or 50?
Your Honor, with the court's permission, I would seek to publish portions of that video for the jury at this time.
Okay.
And Ms. Gilman, if you could, from that video, the first video. And if I could ask you to play from about 7 minutes and 40 seconds, and we'll go through about 9 minutes or so. If you could pause it just there. Now, do you recognize what's up on the screen, Mr. Camarano?
Yes.
And what do you recognize that to be?
C.F. McCarthy's.
And yourself and Mr. O'Keefe are not in frame at this time, is that correct?
No.
If you could, using the laser pointer before you, if you could direct the jury's attention to where it was about in reference to the bar that you and Mr. O'Keefe eventually came to congregate that in.
These seats here?
And from this video, from your time there that night or prior occasions, can you see sort of where the front door is to the establishment?
Yes.
Could you direct the jury's attention to where that is? And so what I'm going to ask in just a moment is for Ms. Gilman to press play, and then what I'd ask you to do is if you could just direct the jury's attention to when, if at all, you observe yourself and Mr. O'Keefe walk in.
Okay.
Ms. Gilman, if you could. Ms. Cameron, if you could pause it right there. And just, I'm sorry, Mr. Camarano, you're directing with the laser pointer to the
Sorry.
screen. If you could just describe what you're directing the jury's attention.
That is me, and that is John.
And thank you, sir.
Well-
Ms. Gilman, if you could just, again, play this through the 9 minutes. And Your Honor, for the record, I think we're at about 9 minutes and 41 seconds or so.
Okay.
So with reference to City of McCarthy's, you went there, had some drinks, correct?
Yes.
Do you recall what you were drinking or what John was drinking that night?
Beer?
Is that sort of typical for the two of you?
Yes.
And do you recall sort of, was that from the tap, a bottle, or something else?
From the bottle?
And do you recall what type of beer typically you would drink or Mr. O'Keefe would drink?
Bud Light?
And do you recall specifically that's what you had that night, or that's just what you would typically have?
Typically, I think we had Bud Light.
And if you know approximately how many beers or how many drinks did you have over the course of your time at CF McCarthy's that night?
I don't.
As far as yourself versus Mr. O'Keefe, do you recall sort of in relation to each other how much you each had to drink?
Not, maybe 6 beers?
And what I'm asking, sir, is it's not like, did one of you have 10 and one of you had 2, or was it sort of commensurate with each other?
Commensurate, one for one.
Okay. So essentially, you're buying rounds as you go along?
Correct.
Now, from your time at CF McCarthy's, how would you describe sort of the tone or sort of the demeanor within the group that you were in that night?
Pretty good.
So no arguments, no fighting, anything like that, you recall?
No.
And just briefly going back to the clothing that you observed Mr. O'Keefe wearing in this and that you recall him wearing that night, what, if any, damage or tears or anything like that did you note in any of his clothing that night?
I did not see any.
Now, Ms. Gilman, if I could ask you to take this down and go to the third video. And Ms. Gilman, if I could direct your attention to the 6-minute and 10-second mark through the 7-minute mark. And when you get to 6:10, if you could just pause. Now, Ms. Camarano, directing your attention to the screen, if you could, from the parties that were within your group sort of that night at the bar, if you could just direct the jury's attention to who is who or who, if anyone, you recognize in the video.
Kurt?
So in addition to yourself and Mr. O'Keefe, Mr. Roberts has now joined your group.
Correct.
And Ms. Gilman, if you could just play it from there. If you could pause there, please. Now, with reference to Mr. Roberts, was he a beer drinker as well?
Yes.
Okay. From a bottle that night, same sort of thing that yourself and Mr. O'Keefe were having?
Correct.
And from where it's paused at this point in the video, who, if anyone else, do you recognize sort of coming into frame or coming to join your group?
Karen Reed?
And so from this, is this about the time that she entered the establishment or came into the bar?
Yes.
Now, with reference to Ms. Reed, what, if anything, do you recall her drinking during your time that you were both at CF McCarthy's that night?
She was drinking out of a glass.
And if you know, what if anything did you observe as far as the color of what was in the glass?
It was clear.
And beyond sort of the clear liquid in the glass, what, if anything else, did you observe in the glass as far as a straw, fruit, anything like that?
A straw, maybe.
And what, if anything, did you know what was in the glass?
I didn't.
And as far as you could tell, what was in the glass?
Vodka?
Is that something that Ms. Reed would typically drink if you had been out with her on prior occasions?
Yes.
Now, I'm sorry to keep jumping back and forth between, but Ms. Gilman, if you could just hit play again and let it run, excuse me, to the 7-minute mark. Ms. Gilman, from this same third video in this exhibit of the C.F. McCarthy's, if I could ask you to forward to the 14-minute mark and pause there. And if you could, I would ask that you play this from the 14-minute mark until about 14 minutes and 15 seconds, so just about 15 seconds. And Ms. Gilman, you can take that down for now. So Mr. Camarano, you indicated that your son was at Luce Elementary School for a play of some sort, is that correct?
He was for a little bit.
And from there, where, if anywhere else, did he go that evening?
He went to a friend's house to skate in his backyard.
Skate as far as just skating, or what, if anything else was he?
He was skating, a little party.
Well, let me ask you this, was he a hockey player?
Yes, he's a hockey player.
Okay, so when you say skating, he's in the
Skating,
backyard.
yes. Makeshift hockey rink in somebody's backyard.
And at some point with relation to that, what, if anything, sort of caused you to leave C.F. McCarthy's on that night?
I received a phone call that my son was hit in the face with a hockey stick and he lost his tooth.
And so upon receiving that call, where did you go?
I went to go get him.
And do you recall about what time that was that you left C.F. McCarthy's to go get him?
I don't recall.
Now, from the group that you were with, as far as yourself, Mr. O'Keefe, Ms. Reed, and Mr. Roberts, who, if anyone, left first?
I believe Kurt.
And do you recall sort of how it was that Kurt left?
Kurt just got up and left.
So, sort of an Irish goodbye?
Yeah, Irish goodbye, yes.
That's something he's known for?
Yes.
And about when was that in relation to when you left?
Not too soon after.
I'm sorry, not too soon after or not too soon before?
I left after, probably, I'd like to say 15 minutes after Kurt left.
Now, with the court's permission, Your Honor, I'd just like to publish just 2 more segments from this.
Okay?
So Ms. Gilman, if I could direct your attention to the 4th video. 4th one down. And if I could ask you to forward it to about 19 minutes and 40 seconds. You could play from there. Ms. Gilman, if I could ask you to just pause it there for 1 second. Now, Ms. Camarano, from your looking at this surveillance video here, or from your memory of that night, you see Mr. O'Keefe speaking to another gentleman, is that correct?
Yes.
You know who that person is?
Yes.
And who is that person?
Sully?
And do you know his first name or anything beyond just Sully?
Sully, I don't know his first name.
And how is it that you know him?
Kids play baseball with his son.
So in addition to your son playing baseball with Mr. O'Keefe's nephew, Mr. Roberts, does he have a son that's around the same age?
Correct.
And this individual, Sully, he has a child that plays baseball with the 3 of your kids?
Correct.
Is that someone that you had contacted to meet there, or he just happened to be there?
He just happened to be there.
Okay. Ms. Gilman, if you could just hit play again and just run to about the 20-minute mark or so. Now, Ms. Gilman, if you could move that forward again to 24 minutes and 10 seconds. And if you could just let this run until about 24 minutes and 20 seconds, so just about 10 seconds or so. And so, Mr. Camarano, did you see yourself in that portion of the video?
Yes,
And do you know what you were doing at that time?
leaving.
And so prior to leaving, had you sort of settled up a tab or something?
Yes, I picked up the tab.
And then you left and went to get your son, correct?
Correct.
Ms. Gilman, you can take that down, please. Now, Mr. Camarano, you left there and went to pick up your son, is that correct?
Yes,
And following picking up your son, where did you go from there?
back to John's house.
And why did you go back to John's house at that time?
My daughter was there picking her up.
You went to pick up your daughter?
Correct.
And you recall approximately what time that was?
11?
And when you came back to the residence at One Meadows, did you park in the driveway again?
Correct.
And did you physically sort of go in the house to pick up?
No, I did. No, I did not.
Now, as far as from the time that from the time that you left with Mr. O'Keefe to go to see at McCarthy's versus the time that you came back, anything changed as far as position of Mr. O'Keefe's car?
No.
What, if anything, did you note as far as the garage doors were concerned, or any damage or anything like that?
Everything looked normal.
And, Your Honor, with the court's permission, I would seek to just publish another video or two from Exhibit 6.
Okay?
Bless you. And at this time, Ms. Gilman, if I could have from the driveway again, video 152. Ms. Gilman, you can stop there. Now, from that video 152 that was just up on the screen, sir, can you describe for the jury, excuse me, just as sort of what was going on in that video?
I was picking up my daughter, Madeline, and my son, Michael, was with me. Yes, all three of us.
And where did you go from there?
Home.
And when you got home, well, let me ask you this first. During the time that you were at C.F. McCarthy's, you obviously, at some point, you didn't do an Irish goodbye?
No.
Okay, so at some point, you indicated to Mr. O'Keefe and or Ms. Reed that you were leaving to go pick up your son?
Yes.
And what, if any, indication did they give to you as far as where they were going, or what were their intentions for the rest of the evening?
They were heading either across the street or to the hillside.
And when you say across the street, what, if anything, was across the street?
There's another bar room.
Is that the waterfall?
Waterfall, yes.
Are you familiar with that establishment as well?
Yes.
And where is that in relation to C.F. McCarthy?
Across the street to the left, if you were coming out of C.F. McCarthy's.
Walking distance, is that correct?
Correct.
And you leave, you get your son, you pick up your daughter at Mr. O'Keefe's house, and then you go home, correct?
Correct.
And when you get home, about how much longer were you up before you went to bed?
Wasn't up much longer.
And when you typically go to bed, what, if anything, do you do with your phone?
Put them on the charger.
Where's the charger located in reference to?
In the kitchen.
And when, following to the next day, about what time is it that you wake up on the 29th?
5:30, 6 a.m.
And what was it that woke you up, if you know?
Phones ringing.
And how many phones do you have?
2.
And essentially one personal, one work, is that correct?
Correct.
Were both phones ringing or one or the other?
One phone at that time.
Was that your work or your personal?
My personal phone.
And get up, you hear that, you look at your phone, what, if anything, do you see on the screen?
I see a lot of missed calls, a bunch of missed calls from Karen, and missed calls from my wife's work.
And when you say missed calls, are we talking about one call, several calls,
Several calls.
any voicemails that you recall associated with those calls?
I don't recall.
And so based on sort of making that observation of the missed calls, what do you do with that?
I pick up the phone and call my wife.
And what, if anything, did you learn from your wife at that time?
My wife said to me that John.
Okay, sustained.
Your Honor, may we approach?
Okay.
So, Mr. Camarano, you call your wife, and what, if anything, is it in general that she tells you?
She tells me that John didn't come home last night.
And she's still at work at this point, is that correct?
Correct.
Did she indicate to you how she came to find that out?
She said she's received phone calls from
From whom?
Karen.
From Karen. And then based on that, you have a conversation with your wife about John's niece and nephew, is that right?
Yes, my wife says to me, go get Kaylee. Kaylee is home.
So at that time, your wife tells you that Kaylee is home in Meadows Ave by herself.
Yes.
And so based on that information, what is it that you do next?
I realize that Kaylee's home alone, so I throw some clothes on, go out to the car, clean the car off real quick, and get in the car and go.
When you say clean the car off real quick, what, if anything, did you have to clean off?
I cleaned the snow off the front windshield.
And again, you sort of drive over to John's house to get Kaylee?
Correct.
And when you get there, do you pull in the driveway as well?
Yes.
And when you get to John's house and you pull in the driveway, what, if anything, did you observe about sort of the condition of the garage doors at that point?
When I pulled in, I could tell the garage door was open, left open.
Which one? The one to the right or the one?
To the one to the right.
And do you go inside that door?
I do.
And what, if anything, did you do once you went inside?
Once I went inside, I saw Kaylee. I asked Kaylee get whatever she needed and to come and get in the car. While she was doing that, I started clearing some snow. I thought maybe snow hit the sensors, so that the door couldn't go down.
And And so you start clearing the snow with a shovel?
With the shovel that was in the garage, yes.
And after you had cleared some of the snow with the shovel, what did you do with regard to the doors at that point?
So I tried to put them down. They wouldn't go down. Then I asked Kaylee, I think, to re-enter the code to see if she could get the doors to go down, but the doors would not go down. The door.
And at some point, how did you get the,
So I manually, there's a red rope. I manually pulled that, shut the door, locked the doors. There's 2 side locks on the garage door, and I went out through the side garage door.
now, when you arrived at the residence and you pulled into the driveway, do you recall how many vehicles were in the driveway when you got there?
Yes.
And how many?
2.
And whose vehicles were they?
John's and Karen's.
And John's vehicle, where was that in relation to the last time that you saw it when you picked up your daughter there?
Same spot.
And as far as the defendant, Ms. Reed's vehicle, where was that in relation to the garage or in relation to the driveway?
It was pulled in on the left side, all the way in.
So in the area of the garage door that you were just speaking
Correct.
about? And at that time, did you look at the vehicle or touch the vehicle in any way?
No.
Fair to say that your focus was sort of on the garage door and the fact that it was open, correct?
Correct.
And why was that? Maybe self-evident, but why was your focus on?
Because I figured John would go crazy when he came home and all the snow was in his garage.
Now, at any point in time when you initially got the call from your wife, did you yourself reach out to John at any point?
I did not.
You know, if I may, I would just seek to publish just a few more videos from Exhibit 6, the driveway ring.
Okay.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have, from those, first starting with video 155, and essentially it's going to go 155 through 158. If you could pause there, please. And Mr. Camarano, you recognize what's up on the screen again?
Yes, my car.
And is this sort of when you're pulling in to get Kelly?
Correct.
Using the laser pointer before you, again, if you could just direct the jury's attention to where you observed Ms. Reed's vehicle. And is that essentially from what you observed there, that's where it was the entirety of the time that you were there?
Yes.
So nobody else came to the home during the time that you were there to pick up Kaylee and shoveling out the snow from the garage?
No.
Ms. Gilman, if you could just run it. Gilman, if you could play the next video, 156.
Car's locked.
Ms. Gilman, next video 157. Lastly, Ms. Gilman, video 158. Ms. Gilman, you can take that. And so, Mr. Camarano, what was just in those last 4 videos that were played before the jury? Is that essentially the process that you were describing as far as yourself and Kaylee trying to get the garage door down?
Correct.
And so you leave from there and go back to your house, is that correct?
Yes.
And where does sort of you and Kaylee go once you get inside?
We go into the house. We're in the kitchen in my house, and my daughter. We get my daughter up.
And your daughter then sort of hangs out with Kaylee for a period of time?
Correct. They go downstairs and they were hanging out.
And at some point in time, how does Kaylee leave your house, or where does she go from there?
I take Kaylee home.
And why is it that you take Kaylee home? About what time is it, if you know?
I don't know what time. Paul had called me.
And by Paul, who do you mean by
Paul O'Keefe, John's brother.
And he had informed you that John had passed?
Yes.
So you took Kaylee to the house on Meadows Ave to be with the family, is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Jackson?
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Camarano, just a few questions. You and your wife did spend a lot of time with John O'Keefe and Karen Reed as a couple, correct?
Decent amount, yes.
Would you have considered John one of your best friends?
A good friend.
In fact, you were close enough that your children spent a lot of time with John O'Keefe and Karen Reed as a couple and their kids, correct?
Correct.
In fact, isn't it true that sometimes they would even vacation together with Mr. O'Keefe and Ms. Reed?
Correct.
There was a trusting relationship that you had with both Mr. O'Keefe and Ms. Reed to put your kids in their care.
Correct.
You mentioned this wonderful news about your kids, your daughter, getting into this great school. I think it was called Bishop.
Bishop fan, yes.
Before the acceptance, there was actually a sort of a process, like an open house, that you needed to take the kids to, correct?
Yes.
You took your daughter, right?
I don't recall.
You remember being at an open house and a tour of Bishop with Karen Reed and John O'Keefe and John's niece?
I do recall being in an auditorium, I do.
Yeah, big auditorium, big tour of the school.
Yes.
In hopes of all the kids getting in.
Yes,
Okay, to make sure it's the right fit for the kids.
correct.
And Karen was there, sort of as a
She was.
matriarch for John's niece.
Yes,
Your daughter spent a lot of time just with Karen, Miss Reed,
correct.
running errands, going to Miss Reed's house, having Miss Reed care for her,
Correct.
and you had no issues with that
No,
because you liked Karen. You liked
Correct.
Miss Reed.
correct.
It was probably, did you say once a week that you would hang out with and socialize with Miss Reed and Mr. O'Keefe?
Yes,
So you got to know them not just individually, but as a couple together, correct?
yes,
You saw them on most Friday nights, right?
correct.
You never saw them argue or fight.
Argue.
Matter of fact, one time you were asked about this in front of a grand jury, and you said, I wouldn't even call it bickering, they would just banter together.
I guess so, yes.
You never heard Mr. O'Keefe complain about Miss Reed or vice versa?
No, I did hear him complain about like when when Karen would buy like very nice things for the kids, like he wouldn't like that, stuff like that, or take the kids to get their nails done or something like that.
So maybe spoiling the children.
Yes,
A little bit.
yes,
Certainly nothing to suggest that there was any abuse or anything like that. It was just a matter of fact.
correct, correct,
Mr. O'Keefe had an idea about how to raise children that was maybe a little bit more modest than Ms. Reed did.
correct,
So you described earlier at another hearing, you described a situation in which Ms. Reed got a very expensive sweater for Mr. O'Keefe's niece.
correct.
And Mr. O'Keefe's response was, boy, I wish he hadn't done that. That's spoiling that little girl.
Yes,
All right. You would agree there are worse things in the world than spoiling a child.
correct.
Objection.
I'll let it stand.
You never heard Mr. O'Keefe even hint at the idea of breaking up with Miss Reed.
Not that I can recall.
I want to turn your attention to January 28th, if I could. We saw a video, and you explained what was happening in the video, where some cars were being jostled around. That was Mr. O'Keefe actually moving his car to facilitate Miss Reed bringing her car over to his house to put it in the garage, correct?
Yes,
Kind of a chivalrous thing to do for your loved one.
yes,
Didn't want her to be out in the snow if it was going to be a heavy snow, is that right?
correct.
And the idea was that even that weekend, he intended that Miss Reed would likely be with him and the family for the entirety of the weekend during that blizzard.
Correct.
So she'd have a nice warm place and a dry place to put her car.
Yes,
You saw a video that Mr. Lally played for you of the moment. There are several videos, but I want to direct your attention or your memory to the video of when Miss Reed actually made her way into McCarthy's.
yes,
You have that scene in your mind?
yes,
You saw in the video when Miss Reed actually walked into the location how Miss Reed and Mr. O'Keefe greeted each other,
Objection.
I'll allow it.
correct?
yes,
It appeared that that was quite an affectionate greeting. Would you agree?
Objection.
Do you agree with that?
they kissed, yeah.
Would you consider a kiss affectionate?
Yes,
They hugged each other, correct?
I don't recall.
Mr. O'Keefe put his right arm out and Miss Reed sort of nestled into his embrace,
Okay,
and that's when he kissed her?
yes,
Okay. They seemed happy to see each other. Is what I
yes,
Um, observe while you were at CF McCarthy's with them, you didn't observe any arguing or bickering between the two of them?
No,
Matter of fact, they were sort of the normal, affectionate, laughing, happy couple that you were used to seeing, correct?
yes,
There didn't seem to be any tension between them at CF McCarthy's, is that right?
not that I recall.
All right. I want to just ask a couple of more questions. During the span of time that you knew them to be together, would you describe their relationship as being normal and caring?
Objection.
I'll sustain that.
I want to just draw your attention to the month before Mr. O'Keefe's passing. Would you describe their relationship to be normal as far as you knew it to be?
Yes,
And on the day before Mr. O'Keefe's passing, would you describe their interactions to be normal and caring and affectionate?
yes.
That's all I have, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay. Anything, Mr. Lally?
No redirect, Your Honor.
All right, Mr. Camarano, thank you very much. You're all set, sir. All right, jurors, why don't we take our morning recess? We'll take 15, 20 minutes.
Jurors, if you'd fold and close your notebooks, placing them on their chairs, taking your belongings. All rise, jury out.
she mentioned something about it, and it's just kind of around it, and there's no notation on the paper 245, and so I, never went over that one. I never really hearing. I remember talking about it one day, and I did find that, but I don't remember anything after that. And I can't find it. Yeah, that's my next step. I was hoping to avoid that, but and also I was gonna. Hey, do you think about this? I don't need an answer right now. When we talked about reciprocal discovery, when it, like not the first time, but the second time, I asked you yesterday about it, and I'm still trying to figure it out. I wasn't too much on April 12th about it. I think it was later. I could be wrong about that. I think it was before too. I got the before. I just did the later.
Court is back in session. You may be seated.
Your next witness, please, Mr. Lally.
Your Honor, the Commonwealth will call Ms. Katherine Camarano.
Step up and blindfold. Ask your name, stand, face the clerk, and sworn.
Repeat your right hand. Do you solemnly swear the evidence given in the court and jury in the case now hearing to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Thank you.
Just slide right up and close to the mic.
Nice and close to that microphone and speak nice and loudly. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, whenever you're ready, Mr. Lally.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
Could you please state your name and spell your last name for the jury?
Katherine Camarano, Camerano.
And where do you live?
Canton.
And how long have you lived in Canton?
Probably about since 2005, maybe 20 years. 2005, I think.
And who, if anyone, do you live in Canton with?
My husband, Michael, and my 2 children.
And how old are your children?
Right now, 13 and 16.
And starting with the 16-year-old, is that a boy or a girl?
Girl,
And the 13-year-old, is that a boy or a girl?
boy.
And as far as activities are concerned with your kids, do they play sports or do they do other sorts of activities?
They play sports. Yep.
And which sports does your 16-year-old daughter play?
Currently, right now, softball.
And has she played any other sports in the past?
She played soccer. She played hockey for a little bit, but mostly soccer and softball.
And your 13-year-old son, what, if any, sports
Hockey,
player does he play?
hockey and baseball.
Now, do you work, man?
I do.
And what do you do?
I'm a nurse.
And how long have you been working as a nurse?
21 years.
And your husband, does he work?
He does.
And what does he do for work?
He's a laborer.
And how long has he been doing that?
Probably 25, maybe even 30 years, actually.
And how long have the two of you been together?
Married,
Now,
20 years? 20 years, 2004.
now, ma'am, if I could turn your attention to January 28th, 2022 into January 29th, 2022. Do you recall those couple days?
Do.
And do you recall what days of the week they were?
It was Friday into Saturday night.
And starting with the Friday of the 28th, were you working that day?
I was working that night.
And sort of typically what kind of shift do you work as
I work 7P to 7A, nights, mostly weekends.
the weekends would be sort of typically when you'd be at work?
Yes.
And around this time of January 2022, when you were at work, do you know what sort of your husband and your children would be doing typically on like a Friday night?
Friday night, they went to Johnny's house a lot, and the kids hung out, and they all just hung out together on a Friday night.
Now, starting with Johnny, who you refer to, you mean John O'Keefe, is that correct?
Yes.
How is it that you came to know John O'Keefe?
My husband got introduced to him, and then the girls started hanging out probably 2018, fourth grade. The boys around the same time when he moved to Meadows, probably around that time.
And so, Mr. O'Keefe, he had a niece and a nephew of who he was a guardian, is that correct?
Correct.
And he had a niece named Kaylee and a nephew named Patrick, correct?
Correct.
And they lived with him, is that correct?
Correct.
Now, with regard to his niece Kaylee and your daughter, how did they know each other?
They first met on the soccer team, probably soccer. Yes, they met soccer fourth grade, or was it it could have been basketball. She played basketball when she was that little, Madeline. Basketball team, fourth or fifth grade. And then quickly by the fifth, sixth grade, they were like best friends attached at the hip.
And as far as Mr. O'Keefe's nephew Patrick, in relation to your son, were they the same age as well?
They played baseball together.
And outside of baseball, were they friendly as well?
Yes,
And so a typical Friday night would be you were at work and your husband and the kids would go over to Mr. O'Keefe's house.
correct.
You knew where Mr. O'Keefe's house was?
Yes,
And where was that?
on Meadows Ave.
And about how far away from your house was Mr. O'Keefe's house on One Meadows Ave?
Maybe 2 miles, maybe? I don't know.
So fairly short distance?
Yes.
Now, with regard to this specific Friday night, January 28th, you were at work and do you know what sort of the plan was with reference to the rest of your family?
Michael, my son was going to play with a friend of his, a school play in the town, and Michael was going to Johnny's with Madeline, my daughter, and they were gonna hang out there for the night, and Michael and Johnny were gonna potentially go out.
Now, with reference to your daughter and Mr. O'Keefe's niece, Kaylee, what, if anything, around, specifically to that day, what, if anything, was sort of going on with them and their school?
They had just got into Bishop Vian High School that day.
And at this time in January 2022, what grade were they in at that?
They were in 8th, they were going into 9th that September.
And so they had been accepted to this private school, Bishop Vian, and got their acceptance letters that day?
Yep.
And what, if any, conversation do you recall having with Mr. O'Keefe in reference to that on that day?
They were just really excited about it. Everyone was really excited that they just got in.
Now, at some point, well, beyond sort of, if you could just sort of describe the nature of your relationship, and by you, I'm using it plural, as far as you and your husband, with regard to Mr. O'Keefe.
He was our friend. He was really good to me and my kids.
And as far as the kids were concerned, what, if any, sort of interplay did you have with regard to his kids and he have with regard to you?
I worked weekends and he would take my kids to sporting. I would do a lot of the stuff during the week if I was around the practices. And him and my husband would always do the games. The kids used to call them my two dads. It was like, they had a lot of fun together. It was like a well-oiled machine.
Now, through your friendship with Mr. O'Keefe, at some point did you come to know someone by the name of Karen Reed?
Yes.
And who was Karen Reed in relation to Mr. O'Keefe?
She was his girlfriend.
And just to be clear, when we're talking about Karen Reed, do you see Ms. Reed in the courtroom
I
today?
do.
Could you just identify as to where she's seated or an article?
Yeah, she's right there.
You know, just ask the record to reflect identification of the defendant by the witness.
Yes.
Now, with regard to the defendant, Ms. Reed, prior to this date of January 28th, 2022, about how long had you known her?
Whenever they started dating, probably 2 years. During COVID. When was COVID? Probably 2 years.
So
Right.
sometime during the COVID pandemic, you met her?
Yeah, yep.
And as far as you were aware, did she live with Mr. O'Keefe and the children, or did she have somewhere else to live?
No, she had a house in Mansfield, but she stayed at Meadows a lot.
And so during the course around this time of January 2022, general time, about how often would you see Mr. O'Keefe?
Probably 3 days a week, I would say.
And sort of typically when you would see him, would that be sort of at a game or at his house, your house?
Anything, drop off, pick up, his house, games, anything.
Now, as far as Mr. O'Keefe and Ms. Reed were concerned with regard to you and your husband, what, if any, socialization did you have sort of outside of the kids?
Yeah, we went out to eat. We went to a comedy show. I would socialize with them.
About how often would you do that?
The kids were around mostly, but maybe a few times. I feel like the kids were usually always around.
Now, at some point, did you become aware that your husband and Mr. O'Keefe had gone out that evening?
Yes.
And how did you become aware of that?
I don't know, either Michael told me or my daughter told me. One of them told me. I forget who.
And do you know where your husband went that night?
I don't remember if he told me exactly where he went.
And at some point, you're still at work, you're working an overnight, is that correct?
Yes.
And the rest of your family, being your husband and your kids, they came home at some point?
They did.
And how do you know sort of when or how they came home?
I have an alarm on my house, so I know when somebody opens the door. I can check at work, and it alerts me if the door's open, if the alarm is on, off, who puts it on, who puts it off, what doors are open, when the alarm is rearmed. And if I usually don't allow sleepovers, and even if I did, my husband would have called me at work.
So fair to say there's a rule within your house that sleepovers don't happen unless you approve?
Yeah.
Now, at some point, I'm going to turn your attention now to the morning of the 29th. At some point, while you were at work, did you receive a call from someone?
Yes.
And who, if anyone, called?
Karen.
And about what time was that?
Probably between 4 and 5.
And what, if anything, did the defendant say to you when she called you around 4 or 5 in the morning?
She was just screaming, "Where's Mike? Where's Mike?"
And was that a typical sort of situation that you would get a call from the defendant at that time?
No, not at all.
And the screaming that you heard, or the phraseology of "Where's Mike," is that something she said once, or more than once, or something else?
She just kept saying it. She just kept saying, "Where's Mike?"
And what, if anything, did you say in response to
I was just trying, I was just like, hold on, calm down. And as I was doing it, I was rechecking like the alarm. I said, he's home with the kids. Let me call him. And at some point I hung up. I called my husband like, I don't know, probably, it felt like 100 times.
Now, you're at work when you get this call, is that right? Mm-hmm. And do you recall sort of where you were, what you were doing when you got the call?
I was getting ready to draw like morning labs, so I knew it was between like 4 and 5 a.m. Somewhere
As
early
far
in the
as
morning.
this sort of screaming, as far as where's Mike, what, if anything, did the defendant indicate as to why she was asking?
John didn't come home.
And from your knowledge of John O'Keefe, was that something that was normal or no?
No.
Now, during this sort of initial call with the defendant, what, if anything, did you hear sort of in the background of that call?
That first call? I don't think I heard anything in that.
Your memory exhausted as to that?
Yeah, I don't remember it.
May I approach you with this?
Yes.
And, ma'am, what I'm going to do is I'm going to place the document before you. I'm going to direct your attention to this second paragraph on the page. If you could just read that to yourself.
Okay. Oh, okay, yeah. I didn't know if that was the,
Anything further, may I approach
Yep.
this retrieve now?
Yes.
oh, yeah, sorry.
And so, Ms. Camarano, after reading what I just placed before you, is your memory refreshed as to what, if anything, you heard in the background of that
Yeah.
initial call?
I could hear Kaylee in the background.
And you hang up on that call, and then what did you do?
Call Michael. And
At any point when you're calling Michael, I think you said you felt like it was about 100 times, did your husband Michael answer the phone?
he
or did
never answered. No,
And so after you called your husband many times, he didn't answer, what did you do then?
I called either Karen's phone or Kaylee's phone back. I texted John, I think, twice. And then I could, whoever's phone I called, I could hear Jen in the background, that someone had called Jen too.
So you were speaking on the phone with either the defendant or Kaylee, correct?
Yep,
And you could hear someone named Jen in the background?
yep, I could hear her in the background.
And when you say you could hear someone,
Like it sounded, sorry,
no, so just as far as Jen, who is that?
Jen McCabe. She was one of Madeline's basketball coaches, so I know her voice.
Heard her sort of voice on the sidelines? numerous
Yeah,
times.
yep.
And did you know her personally at all?
I knew her as Madeline's coach.
And at some point you were talking to Kaylee on the phone, correct?
Yes.
And what is it that you were saying, Kaylee, at that time?
I was just saying to her, is everybody okay? And she said they're gonna go out looking for him. I think she said they were gonna go out looking, or she went out, she's gonna go out. No one knows where he is. And then I think I like hung up with her. And then at some point I maybe texted Kaylee or called, and I said, is Karen out alone? And she said, no, she's with Jen and Kerry. So I said, okay, as long as they're not alone.
Now, the second phone call, you're talking to Kaylee and you can hear the defendant talking to Ms. McCabe, is that correct?
Yes,
And Do you hear one side of the conversation or both sides of the conversation?
I don't really recall exactly. I felt like it was just like a lot of like screaming, like he's not home. I don't really recall 100%.
But as far as the screaming that you heard that he's not home, do you recall whose voice that was that you heard saying that?
It was Karen.
And beyond that, as far as the conversation that you overheard, what, if anything, specific about that conversation, in addition to that, do you recall?
I don't.
And while these phone calls are going on, again, you're at work, correct?
Correct.
So what is it that you're doing sort of in relation to your job while these phone calls are going back?
I'm trying to like, in between, draw labs for my patients, and then I'm like going in the back room, texting or calling, and then I'd go back out to the desk, out to the patients.
You mentioned that the defendant was sort of screaming when she was talking to you on the phone, and you heard her in the background when you were talking to Kaylee.
Yep.
Could you describe sort of, or how would you describe sort of her, and by her I mean the defendant's demeanor while you heard her on the phone?
She was just like frantically screaming. Just screaming. Where's Mike?
Now, during this time, you're working, you're dealing with patients, and you're going back and forth
Yeah.
between patients and the phone. And in addition to speaking on the phone with the defendant and then with Kaylee, who, if anyone else, did you reach out to or did you talk to that morning?
I talked to Carrie Roberts in the morning at some point. I don't know if I called her, she called me, and she said that I think that he was going to the hospital, and then I called my husband and told him that Kaylee was home alone and that he should go get her because she was at the house alone.
Is it your understanding that your husband, Michael, then went to Meadows to pick up Kaylee?
Is that yes, ma'am?
Yes, sorry.
Now, you mentioned that at some point you spoke to Kerry Roberts, is that correct?
Yes.
How do you know Kerry Roberts?
I've known her since high school.
And as far as you grew up in the same town, is that correct?
No, I was friends with her cousin, so I had known her. And I've always known her. I've been friends with her for a while.
Just one moment, John.
Sure.
May I approach a witness, Your Honor?
Yes.
Ma'am, I'm going to show you what's been previously marked as Exhibit 48. And before I do that, I just need to show counsel what I'm showing you. May I approach him?
Yes.
Showing you what's been marked as Exhibit 48, specifically on page 22. With respect to that box, white box sort of towards the top of the page, you see a listing as sort of participants of that conversation?
Yes,
That's a text conversation.
yes.
And who is sort of listed as the participant within that conversation?
Katie Camarano and JJ.
And is JJ another sort of name or nickname for John O'Keefe?
Yep,
And the content, there's two blue bubbles on the bottom of that page, is that correct?
correct.
And do you recognize the content of those bubbles?
Yes.
And what do you recognize those to be?
My text messages to him.
Those are the text messages you just testified about as far as sending to John that morning.
Correct.
And both of them are from you with no response from Mr. O'Keefe.
Correct.
And about what time are the two text messages sent to Mr. O'Keefe according to that document?
5:10.
May I approach this to retrieve, John?
Yes.
Now, Ms. Camarano, you had mentioned in your testimony that you had some phone calls or conversations with Ms. Reed on the morning of January 29th, correct?
Correct.
May I approach again, Your Honor?
Yes.
Showing you another document, ma'am. Just ask that you look at that and look up when you're finished.
Yeah.
And that document, do those seem to reflect the calls that you have between yourself and the defendant, Ms. Reed, on that morning of the 29th?
Yeah.
Objection, Your Honor. May we approach briefly?
Sure. Could I please see that? Ms. Camarano.
Thank you.
And so, Ms. Camarano, from that document, does that seem to be the phone calls and the timing of the phone calls between yourself and Ms. Reed that morning?
Okay. Yes.
May I approach again, Your Honor?
Yes.
I'll open to introduce in a minute the next exhibit.
Any objection, Mr. Jackson?
Not at this time, Your Honor.
All right, thank you.
I'm showing that to you, which is now been marked as Exhibit 51. Your Honor, with the court's permission, I would request to publish that to the jury on the screen.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Camarano.
Thank you, Madam Court Reporter.
And I'm sorry, Ms. Gilman, if you could please just see if you could enlarge that just a little bit.
Mr. Lally, keep your voice up and step aside so all jurors could see this, please.
Yes. Just before we get to what's up on the screen, is that what you have before you as Exhibit 51?
Yes.
No, Ms. Camarano, starting from sort of as far as the order of these, do you see sort of to and from and sort of date times on there?
Yes.
And does it appear as if the earlier times are sorted towards the bottom and then it goes on and time and chronology towards the top.
Yes.
Ms. Gilman, if you could scroll to sort of the bottom of the box. Now, with reference to, essentially there are 6 boxes, am I correct in that?
Correct.
And with regard to box 6, if you could just tell the jury sort of,
It says 1/29/2022, 4:49 a.m. to Katie Camarano, answered 2 minutes and 51 seconds.
and the box above that, number 5.
It looks like I called her at 4:56 on 1/29 for 2 minutes and 57 seconds, answered.
And the box above that, number 4, please.
I called her 5 a.m., 2 minutes and 4 seconds, answered. And then I called her again at 5:32 for 8 seconds. That was answered. And then I called her again at 5:34, was missed. At 5:34 was missed. And then I called her again at 6:44 and 49 seconds, and that was not answered.
Thank you. May I approach just to retrieve, Your Honor?
Yes.
You can take that down.
Thank you.
Now, with respect, Ms. Camarano, is your testimony that in addition to the phone calls that you had with the defendant, you also had some texts back and forth that morning as well?
Correct.
And Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
Ms. Camarano, showing you a document, asking if you could just take a look at that and look up when you're finished.
Yep.
And do you recognize what that what's in that document?
Yes.
What do you recognize it to be?
It's my text to Karen.
And with respect to the sort of first page of that, is there also, similar to the ones I showed you with regard to Mr. O'Keefe, is there a listing as far as the participants in that conversation?
Yes.
And who does it state?
It's Karen Reed and Katie Camarano.
May I approach again?
Yes.
I'll move to seek to introduce in a minute the next exhibit.
No objection, Mr. Jackson?
No objection, Your
All
Honor.
right, thank you.
Ms. Camarano, returning what's now been marked as Exhibit 52 to you. And Your Honor, with the court's permission, I would seek to publish this on the screen for the jury as well.
Okay.
Now, Ms. Camarano, if I could direct your attention to sort of the content of this, there's blue bubbles and green bubbles, is that correct?
Correct.
And is there an indication on there as far as who the message is from and who the message is to?
The blue bubbles would be me texting Karen.
And if you could, starting with the first bubble on page 1, if you could just describe to the jury, and we'll sort of go through it, as far as who the text is from and what the content is.
That's from me. I'm asking Karen, are you okay?
And Ms. Gilman, if you could scroll down. And this next bubble.
Go back home so you're safe with Kaylee. He will end up home. I bet he's on someone's couch.
And the next bubble down, Ms. Gilman.
What's going on, Karen?
And if you could scroll down a little further, Ms. Gilman.
I'm driving around with Carrie and Jen.
And this is the text that you received from
From-
Ms. Reed to yourself?
Yes.
And is there a time on that associated with when that text was sent?
I can't read that from there. 5:53, does it say?
5:53 a.m., is that correct?
Oh, 5:53, yes.
Ms. Gilman, if you could scroll down to the next message.
Okay, is one of them driving?
And just to be clear, this is you texting Ms.
I'm
Reed.
texting Karen, yes. Is one of them driving? And then,
And why were you texting that, or why were you concerned about that?
because she was so hysterical, I didn't want her driving.
And Ms. Gilman, if you could scroll down to the next message. And what, if any, response did you receive from Ms. Reed?
Yes.
And Ms. Gilman, if you could, scroll down to the next.
And I said, okay, keep me posted.
Gilman, if you could, scroll down to
At his brother's or mom's, ? Or the station he works at.
both of those messages. About what time were those?
6 a.m.
And what, if any, if Ms. Gilman, if you could scroll down, and then what, if any, response did you receive from the defendant, Ms. Reed, following those texts?
I don't think so. His bro is in West Bridgewater, W. Bridgewater.
Ms. Gilman, if you could scroll down again. The next message, ma'am.
Right, I'm sorry, I'm just brainstorming.
The next green bubble, ma'am.
It's okay.
And the blue bubble below that.
Any luck?
And that was a text you sent at approximately what time, ma'am?
6:34.
And Ms. Gilman, if you could scroll down to the next one. And what was Ms.
Then-
Reed's response?
He's dead.
And again, at what time did you receive that text message from Ms.
6:34.
Ms. Gilman, if you could scroll down again.
What, Karen, are you serious?
That's a blue bubble, your response to her last statement.
Yes.
Ms. Gilman, if you could scroll down again.
And then Karen, do you have any idea where he is, or did you find him?
And lastly, Ms. Gilman, if you could scroll down one more time.
He was in the snow.
That last message that you received, what time was that?
That was at 6:36.
Ms. Gilman, you can take that down. And Mr. Officer, if you could authorize that. Thank you. Following that text message, the last one about 6:34 a.m., what, if any, other communication did you have with the defendant that morning?
Nothing.
What, if any, other communication did you have with the defendant since then?
None.
Now, as far as any of the other people that you spoke of, as far as talking to that morning, Ms. Roberts or Kaylee, did you have any further conversation with them in regard to what was going on?
No.
If I may have just one moment, Your Honor. Nothing further for this witness, Your Honor.
All right, cross-examination?
Hello, Mrs. Camarano.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. To Mr. Lally last point, after that series of text messages that you had early in the morning on January 29th, 2022, you said you didn't hear from Ms. Reed or didn't have any communication with her after that, is that right?
Yeah, yes,
Did you reach out to her, text message-wise?
no,
Okay, were you aware that her phone had been seized shortly thereafter from her?
no.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
All right, Ms. Camarano. Oh, there's nothing else, Mr. Lally, right? All right, Ms. Camarano, you're all set. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Your next witness, Mr. Lally?
Yes, Your Honor, the Commonwealth will call Mr. Kurt Roberts to the stand.
Stay standing, face the left and sworn in.
Do solemnly swear the evidence you give the court and jury in the case now and hearing should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Thank you. Just nice and loud into that microphone, thanks. Great.
All right, whenever you're ready, Mr. Lally.
Thank you. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Would you please state your name and spell your last name for the...
Kurt Roberts, Roberts,
And where do you live, sir?
Canton, Mass.
And how long have you lived in Canton?
About 12 years now.
And who, if anyone, do you live in Canton with?
I live with my wife and 2 children.
And your wife, what is your wife's name?
Kerry.
And how long have the two of you been married?
We've been married 15 years.
And you mentioned you have 2 children, is that correct?
Yes.
And how old are your kids?
My daughter is 14 and my son is 12.
And do you work, sir?
I do.
And what do you do?
I'm a heavy equipment operator.
About how long have you been doing it?
26 years.
And your wife, Carrie, does she work as well?
She does.
And what does she do?
She's a executive assistant.
And do you know about how long she's been doing
I
it?
think about 18 years.
And if I could turn your attention to the evening of January 28th, 2022. Do you recall that day?
I do.
And do you recall anything about what you were doing? Do you recall what day of the week it was?
I know it was a Friday night.
And earlier in the day, do you recall anything specific about what you were doing that day?
Gee, no, I don't. Nothing stands out.
And at some point in time in the evening, where were you initially?
Excuse me? I didn't,
So at some point in time in the evening, were you at home?
yes, I was at home.
And while you were at home, who, if anyone, reached out to you?
Michael Camarano and John O'Keefe.
And starting with Michael Camarano, how do you know?
I grew up with him since 6th grade. We're both from the same town, Milton.
So the two of you grew up in Milton together. You've known him essentially since then.
Yes,
How would you describe sort of your relationship with Mr. Camarano?
we're friends.
And does Mr. Camarano, does he have any children around the age of your 2 children?
Yes, he is, I believe, a 16-year-old daughter and a 12-year-old son.
And his son and your son, do they do any sort of activities together?
They played baseball together.
Now, you mentioned John O'Keefe as well, correct?
Yes.
And how did you know John O'Keefe?
When his sister and brother-in-law had passed, he had moved into the house that they lived in my neighborhood. And my wife knew him previously and introduced me in.
And the house that he moved into with regard to where his sister and brother-in-law lived, where was that in relation to where you lived?
An eighth of, like, Not far, very easily walking distance, maybe not far.
And the house that Mr. O'Keefe moved into, who, if anyone, did he initially live there with when he moved?
He moved in there with the two, his niece and nephew.
So his niece and nephew from the couple that had passed away.
Yes,
And he had a niece named Kaylee, is that correct?
yes,
A nephew named Patrick.
yes.
And with respect to his nephew Patrick, how old was he in relation to your son and Mr. Camarano's?
Same age,
And as far as the activities,
same,
baseball and stuff?
same baseball team, yep.
So all three of the kids, played baseball together for several years.
Yes.
Now, at some point, did Mr. O'Keefe move away from that house that was
He did. He did. He moved to
moved to?
One Meadows,
And sort of from your house, where was that in relation to your house?
probably 2 or 3 miles, a lot further away.
A lot further away, sort of on the Stoughton side of Canton, is that correct?
That's correct.
And do you recall about what year it was that the kids moved over to Meadows?
Maybe 2019, maybe? I'm not sure of that.
Now, at some point, over the course of through your knowing Mr. O'Keefe, did you come to know someone by the name of Karen? And when was it in relation to January 28th, 2022? About how long before that was it that you met Karen?
Probably maybe a year or two.
About a year or two before?
Yes, I don't recall exactly.
Do you recall when it was that you first met her?
I think she might have came to my house, maybe with John.
Okay. Now, as far as, what, if anything, did you know as far as the relationship between Miss Reed and Mr. O'Keefe?
I don't understand.
Who was Miss Reed to Mr. O'Keefe?
Oh, girlfriend. Sorry.
Nothing is your fault, it's entirely my question, okay? Okay, so with respect, and just so we're clear as far as who we're talking about, do you see Ms. Reed in the courtroom today?
Yes, I do.
If you could just identify as to where she's seated or an article of clothing she's wearing?
She's seated right there.
And again, just as a record reflect identification. Identify
Yes.
the witness. Thank you. Now, as far as their relationship, that, and by they, I mean Mr. O'Keefe and Ms. Reed, is that something that you talked to Mr. O'Keefe about?
No,
And sort of vice versa, as far as your relationship with your wife, is that something that you talked to Mr. O'Keefe about?
no.
Now, with regard to that particular evening on January 28th, 2022, you mentioned at some point that Mr. Camarano and/or Mr. O'Keefe reached out to you.
They did.
And what was that in regard to? What was that conversation?
They reached out. They were at McCarthy's, the bar in Canton Center, and they wanted me to come up. And I was saying, I didn't want to. I wanted to stay in because there was a storm coming. And then he called me a pussy, and I, sorry, I can't let that happen. So I had to go.
Fair enough.
So I had to go up there, and
Do you recall who it was that called you that?
it was Michael Camarano.
Let the record reflect. Okay. You receive that text and you go to CF McCarthy's, is that right?
That's right.
And you mentioned that's in Canton Center?
Yes.
And about how far a drive is that from your house to CF McCarthy's?
2.5, maybe 3 miles at best.
And do you recall about what time it was that you received that now infamous text and you go make your way to CF McCarthy's?
Yes, it was about 20 past 8.
Is that a place that you had been to before?
Not often, but I have been there before.
When you arrive to CF McCarthy's, who, if anyone, that you know is sort of there when you get there?
John O'Keefe and Michael Camarano.
And if you could, for the jury, just describe sort of what you know of sort of the inside of City of McCarthy's as far as you walk in the door and what is the layout of the bar?
Walk in the door, go to the left, and the bar's right in front of you. It's a big square bar. And then the bathrooms are in the back, and there's tables off to the left.
And where in relation to the bar and the tables and what you've described were Mr. O'Keefe and Mr. Camarano when you were there?
And walking to the left, they were on my left.
And the area where you came up to and where they were, is that essentially sort of the same area that you and the group that you were with stayed in for most of the night?
Yes.
And if you recall, so you went out to a bar, fair to say you had something, correct?
Yes.
Do you recall what you were drinking that night?
I believe it was a Bud Light.
Do you recall whether that was draft or a bottle or something else?
It was a bottle.
That's sort of typically what you would drink when you go out?
Back then, yes.
And with regard to Mr. Camarano and Mr. O'Keefe, do you recall what they were drinking that night?
I believe the same as me. I believe. I wasn't much paying attention to that, but that's what they normally would drink.
Now, with the, with the court's permission, if I could publish to the jury portions of what's been marked as Exhibit 50 to see if McCarthy's video.
Okay.
Now, Ms. Gilman, if I could ask for the second video. And if I could ask you to push it forward to 34 minutes and 10 seconds. If you could pause it there just for a moment. Now, Mr. Roberts, direct your attention to the screen, what's been marked as Exhibit 50. Also, I believe there should be a laser pointer on the desk in front of you. So if you just click on that button and point it in a direction, you can sort of highlight it. So if I could ask you, first of all, do you recognize what's depicted up on the screen as Exhibit 50?
Yes.
And what do you recognize it to be, sir?
I see John right there and Michael right there.
And does this appear to be consistent with what you recollect as far as the interior of City of McCarthy on January 20th?
Yes.
And this area that you just pointed out to as far as where Mr. O'Keefe and Mr. Camarano is that the area where you just testified to they essentially were during the time that you were there?
Yes, it is.
Now, with respect to Mr. O'Keefe, you can see sort of what he's wearing in this video, is that correct?
Yes.
And the clothing, at least as far as you can see, is that the clothing that you observed Mr. O'Keefe to be wearing that night?
Yes, that was what he was wearing.
And Ms. Gilman, if you could, I would ask just to play this from the 34:10 mark until 35. Pause there just a moment. The gentleman that just came in through the door, do you recognize him, sir?
Yes, I do.
And who do you recognize him?
That's me.
So that was about the time that you were around, is that correct?
Yes.
Ms. Gilman, if you could just continue it for about another 33 seconds. Directing your attention still up to the screen, Mr. Roberts, there's another individual around yourself, Mr. O'Keefe and Mr. Camarano, was that correct?
Yes.
And do you recognize who that person is?
At the time, I didn't know. I didn't know. He doesn't look the same in this picture right now, but I believe it's Sully.
And that's someone at this time on January 28th, you didn't know who that was?
No, I did not.
You now do?
I do now, yes.
Okay. Who do you know him to be in relation to sort of yourself and Mr. Camarano and Mr. O'Keefe?
Well, I know his son plays baseball on my son's baseball team. And I met him that night. We were talking.
This would have been the first time that you had met this person you now know as Sully.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Now, with reference to this evening, at some point, who, if anyone else, sort of came into the bar and joined your group?
Karen Reed.
And that was sometime after you had initially arrived, is that correct?
I believe so, yes. It was after I had already been there, I believe.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could, from the same exhibit, but going to the fourth video down. And if I could ask you to bring it up to 22 minutes and 20 seconds. If you could just pause. Now, as far as Ms. Reed, you see Ms. Reed in this video?
Yes, I do.
And if you could, just using that laser pointer, direct the jury's attention to where you see Ms. Reed.
Right there.
Now, Mr. Roberts, you were, fair to say, a little reluctant to come out that evening, is that correct?
That's correct.
And as far as timing, about how long was it that you stayed at C.F. McCarthy's before you left?
It's a good hour. 1 hour.
An hour or so?
So I was home by about 10:15. I was home.
And if you recall, about how many beers did you have while you were there?
Probably 3 or 4.
And what you were drinking, was that, as far as amount was concerned, was that the same, less, more so than sort of the other people that you were with?
Probably one more. I would think. I kind of drank them kind of fast because I was taking off.
So you may have lapped them by a round or something?
Sure. Yes.
Now, you mentioned what you and Mr. O'Keefe and Mr. Camarano were drinking. What, if anything, did you observe Ms. Reed to be drinking at that?
It was a clear glass with probably a lime in it. I'm assuming a vodka tonic, maybe. I'm not positive what it was, but it was a clear glass with.
And from your prior sort of interactions or socialization with Ms. Reed, is that something that she would typically drink?
Yes, I guess I would say.
And about what time was it, again, that you left?
I think I left about 10 o'clock. Took me a few minutes to get home, so.
And with regard to when you left, did you sort of announce that to anybody, or how did you?
I usually don't, because then I'll have to deal with it again, but when we walked out, me and Michael Camarano, I believe, about the same time. I might have been a minute or two before him, that's all.
So you sort of exit, and then at some point in time, around the time that you left, Mr. Camarano left as well.
That's right.
And Ms. Gilman, from what's up here as Exhibit 50, if I could ask you to just play from this point till about 22 minutes and 50 seconds. And thank you, Ms. Gilman, you can take that. Correct?
I believe so, yes.
So fair to say that was about the time that you left. to, during the time that you were at McCarthy's with this group, including yourself, Mr. O'Keefe, Mr. Camarano, and Ms. Reed, how would you describe sort of the general tone or demeanor of the group while you were there?
Everything very normal. Just a few friends out having some drinks. Nothing that stands out.
No arguing, no anything?
No.
And as far as the clothing that I asked you about with regard to what Mr. O'Keefe was wearing, when you were there that night, did you notice anything as far as tears in the clothing or any dishevelment, anything like that?
No, I didn't notice anything.
And when you were there and you were talking to Mr. O'Keefe, what, if any, sort of injuries or anything about him did you note as far as his face or anything else that you could see?
Nothing, no.
Now, once you left, where did you go?
I went home.
And do you recall when you got home, I think you've already said it, but about what time was it that you got home?
But I think 10:15 would be my best guess.
When you got home, who, if anyone else from your house, from your family, was there?
I believe my wife and kids were there. They're up in bed, but they weren't downstairs.
And at some point, did you go to bed that evening?
I did.
And about what time was that?
Probably when I saw the snow start coming down. Probably 11:30, 12, maybe midnight. That
And about the time, you mentioned that you had been aware that there was a storm coming in, correct?
yes.
About the time that you went to bed, around midnight or so, what, if anything, did you observe? Did you look outside or see anything?
It was snowing. It was snowing. So
And in relation to that, what, if anything, could you hear while you were in the house, sort of making
Oh,
your way to bed?
the wind was hitting the windows. You just knew it was a storm.
Now, you go to sleep with your wife, correct?
That's right. Yes.
And at some point the next morning on the 29th, what, if anything, is it that wakes you up?
A voice on my wife's phone was yelling, like screaming, frantic on the. It wasn't, and that woke me up. So I asked, what is that?
And initially, did you recognize that voice on your wife's phone?
I didn't recognize it, but I just couldn't make out the words. But it was just a screaming.
And could you hear anything as far? You couldn't make out the words.
I couldn't make out the. No.
And at some point, did you recognize that voice or come to find out who was on the other end of the phone with you?
Yes, I did. It was Karen Reed.
And about what time of the morning was that? If you know?
I'd say 5 o'clock would be a good guess.
And as far as you wake up, you hear the screaming, what happened then?
My wife gets up. She starts getting crazy and then putting her clothes on and running out. I'm telling her not to go because the weather was pretty bad at that point. And of course, she goes,
So she doesn't listen to you and she continues to get dressed and go?
yes.
And when you say the weather was pretty bad at that point, can you expound upon that as far as what you
It
saw?
was snowing. It was snowing. It was very windy. It was snowing heavy.
And your wife, Carrie, did she say where she was going?
Said, John's missing, and I got to go. I don't know exactly what she said, where she was going.
Now, from the time that you initially sort of wake up around 5 a.m. or so to the screaming on the phone to the time that your wife, Ms. Roberts, leaves your house, how much time had elapsed between those two things?
By the time I woke up until she left, I'd say 15 minutes.
And when your wife leaves the house and she's driving, is that correct?
She was.
And do you recall which car she took?
She took her car, Ford Explorer.
And that's an SUV, is that correct?
Yes.
Do you recall what color the Ford Explorer
It,
was?
it's gray.
Now, after she leaves, when is the next time that you spoke to your wife?
She called me. She called me on the phone. I forget. I can't really recall exact times now. They tell me that they found John. He's in the ambulance. They bring him to the hospital, and she was going to get Mr. and Mrs. O'Keefe.
And by Mr. and Mrs. O'Keefe, who did you understand that?
John and John's parents.
And did you know John's parents?
I did.
And did you know where they lived?
I did.
And where did they live?
In Braintree.
So your wife calls you, tells you Mr. O'Keefe's in an ambulance and she's going to Braintree to get his parents.
That's right.
And after you heard that, what is it that you did next?
I believe I snowblowed the driveway, got it ready because I knew she's going to come home in a mood.
To clear your driveway?
So she could, yes, because it was, yes.
Now, when you go out to clear the driveway at the time that your wife calls you, about how much snow was in the driveway at that point?
I'd say there was drifts of at least a foot or so. It was pretty good. It was a lot. Tough to get the car in.
And if you know about what time was it that your wife returned home that day?
8 o'clock? I don't know exact time.
And when you say 8 o'clock, you mean 8 o'clock in the morning or night?
A.M.
8 a.m. If I may have just one moment, Your Honor.
Yes.
No further questions for this witness, Your Honor.
All right, cross-examination?
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Mr. Roberts, you and I have never met, correct?
Correct.
That night that you went out to CF McCarthy's, where you were sort of pressured or goaded into going out, you did get a chance to observe John O'Keefe at the bar, correct?
I did, yes.
Did you ever see him wearing a puffy jacket?
Never.
Did you ever see a puffy jacket around his chair that he was sitting in?
Not that I recall, no.
Ever see him holding a puffy jacket?
No.
Now, you noticed on the video, one of the last videos that Mr. Lally played for you, that prior to your making the Irish exit there, you did have some interaction with Karen Reed, correct?
I believe so at the end.
You saw that the two of you were at one point face to face.
I did for a brief.
Yes, it
Brief.
was, maybe 10 or 20 seconds.
Okay,
Does that sound fair?
it does.
And when you were face to face, you were looking at her and she was looking at you, correct?
Yes.
And there was some type of interchange between the two of you?
Maybe I was just saying bye. I don't recall. I don't
Yeah, you
know.
probably don't remember the specifics of
No, I
of
don't.
what the conversation was, but there appeared to be some type of small conversation.
I saw her from the video, yes.
And while you were speaking to her, you had no indication that she was slurring her words in any way, correct?
I didn't think so, no.
No. Her eyes didn't appear to be bloodshot and glassy, correct?
Correct.
She wasn't swaying or stumbling in any way, correct?
Correct.
She didn't appear to be confused in her thinking or her speech.
She did not.
She appeared to be normal, correct?
Yes.
There was nothing about her demeanor or her interaction with you that would lead you to believe that she was under the influence of alcohol at that time.
No, not.
And during the time that you spent with them at the bar, you didn't see any evidence of any problems between Karen and John O'Keefe?
I did not.
No arguments or bickering or anything like that?
No.
Neither one of them was complaining about the other, correct?
Correct.
Were you able to see any of the affection between the two of them, either physically or with regard to what they were saying?
I didn't see any, any,
Seems like you were more concentrated on,
I was talking with the guy.
we were talking with Mike at the bar. and-
So,
But you had known Karen, or at least known of her, and had some interactions with her for, I believe your testimony was about a year or two?
yes,
During that time, there was some interaction with Karen at your house because there were pickups and drop-offs that had to be made?
yes,
And you would see that, you know, Karen had been to your house when you were there, specifically to pick up your son, correct?
yes.
How often would that occur?
I don't recall, not, I don't think,
Both times?
maybe. Actually,
And she would pick him up to either take him to school or sports or some activity,
I
correct?
believe it was normally like the baseball, maybe. I believe. I don't know. I don't arrange that stuff. My wife takes care of that, so I don't arrange for the pickups, and it's usually my wife does that. So I can't tell you exactly what it was for.
No, I understand. I'm just getting the fact that you were present when these pickups occurred.
Yes,
And that would be because Karen was sort of shuttling, you know, either Kaylee or Patrick to events, correct?
correct.
And when there was an intersection with, specifically with regard to Patrick and your son, she would take both of them, correct?
Yes,
And from your observations of Karen Reed during those, you know, that 1 or 2 years that you had come into contact with her, the contact you had was mainly surrounding what happened with the kids, correct?
yeah, I would say mainly.
And she appeared to be responsible, correct?
Objection, Your Honor.
The objection sustained. Ask it differently, Ms. Giannetti.
Sure. She appeared to be caring toward the kids, did she not?
Objection.
Overruled.
May we approach?
Okay. Jurors, feel free to stand up and stretch.
Just one question for you, just to sort of alter the last question that I asked you. From your read on this, it appeared to you as though Karen was caring for the kids and caring about them, correct?
Correct.
Nothing further.
Okay, any follow-up, Mr. Lally?
Briefly, just one question, sir. As far as your observations of Ms. Reed in regard to Mr. O'Keefe and in regard to the children, that was what you observed, correct?
That's right.
And so as far as what, if anything, went on behind closed doors or in their relationship, you weren't really privy to that?
I was not.
Okay, nothing further.
All right, Mr. Roberts, you are all set, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Your next witness, Mr. Lally?
Yes, Your Honor, the Commonwealth to call Ms. Rebecca Traers to the stand.
Excuse me, raise your hand. Do you solemnly swear the evidence you give the court and jury in the case hearing here should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. And just keep your voice up, please.
All right, whenever you're ready, Mr. Lally.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon.
Could you please state your name and just spell your last name for the jury?
Rebecca Trayers, Trayers.
Ms. Traers, what do you do for work?
I am a bartender.
And where is it that you work as a bartender?
Waterfall Bar and Grill
And where is that located?
in Canton, Massachusetts.
And how long have you worked there in that capacity?
About 7 years.
And in relation to where in Canton, Massachusetts is the waterfall located?
In the center.
And is there a typical sort of shift or nights that you would work in regard to working at the waterfall?
At the moment, it's like Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights.
And when you work sort of the nights, what time is it sort of that you start and what time is it that you typically quit?
The shift starts at 5 and we are by volume. So it's once like people start leaving, generally around 10 to 11.
And sort of what is the latest that, based on volume, if people are sort of hanging around in the bar, when would you sort of, last call, turn the lights on kind of thing?
12:45 is the latest that we could do last call.
Now, during the shifts that you work, about how many people, or like what does sort of the staff look like in regard to sort of your evening shift?
For upstairs, there's typically like 2 of us with a couple of food runners.
And with regard to entertainment, does the waterfall have certain nights of entertainment, sort of live entertainment within?
Fridays and Saturdays.
And what kind of entertainment would be there on a Friday or Saturday?
Bands.
And is that sort of the same bands over and over, or is it sort of different bands as it goes?
They rotate throughout months.
Now, were you working at the waterfall in that capacity around or on January 28th, 2022?
Yes.
And let me ask you, stepping back for a second, just more general questions. What time does the waterfall typically open?
Open like 11 a.m.
So basically 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. or based on volume when you close?
Is that yes, ma'am?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, with respect to the waterfall, if you could just sort of describe, I know it's located in the Canton Center area, but what kind of building is it? What, if anything, else is sort of around it?
It's in a condo unit.
So in a condo sort of complex?
Yeah.
And is there a parking lot associated with both the complex and with the waterfall?
Yes.
And as far as entrances and exits, how many of those each are there?
4.
And what is sort of the typical entrance that people would come in?
There's typically 2, one in the front and then one on the back by the patio.
And so the one by the front is, where is that in relation to the parking lot?
It's right outside the parking lot.
And so if I walk into that front door over by the parking lot and come in, can you describe for the jury sort of the layout or like sort of how many tables, what kind of tables that you observe there?
When you initially walk in, you walk into like the lounge area. There's about 7 or 8 high tops and then probably 4 or 5 low tops. And then right beyond that is the bar area, which leads into the patio. And we have 2 back rooms also, but those aren't typically used.
And as far as high tops and the low tops, starting with the low tops, about how many chairs would typically be around the low top table?
4.
And as far as the high tops, how many chairs?
6 and 2. We have both.
Now, is there, in addition to being a bar, is it also sort of a restaurant? You serve food? And is there sort of how is that staffed as far as the kitchen staff is?
In the kitchen, there's typically 2 cooks at a time. That's downstairs.
And maybe pretty well understood, but just as far as your duties and sort of responsibilities as a bartender, what is it that you do?
I serve drinks and take food orders.
Now, are there people, do you have sort of regular customers that come in on a fairly regular basis?
Yes.
With respect to the bar, is that sort of a full service bar?
What would full service be?
4 questions, let me rephrase. So you have beer and wine, is that correct?
Yes.
And is there sort of mixed drinks and cocktails and things of that nature as well?
Yes.
Now, when it comes to the glassware that the waterfall has, where does that typically, where does that come from?
Like, where do we buy it? Is that what you're asking? Typically a restaurant depot.
And is there like a certain type of, well, let me start back. So if you're getting something that's either a draft beer or wine cocktail, does the type of drink that you're ordering have any reflection in the type of glass you would receive?
For the most part, yes.
And as far as if you're, let's say, getting a non-alcoholic drink, how would that typically be served?
In a pint glass.
I'm sorry, what was the answer?
A pint glass?
Thank you.
And if you were getting a mixed drink or a cocktail, how would that typically be? What kind of glass would that typically be served?
In like a shorter one.
And the shorter sort of cocktail glass, as far as the weight of that, would that be heavier or less heavy than the pint glass?
The same.
And as far as the sort of thickness of that cocktail glass, would it be thicker at the bottom or thicker at the top or something?
We have different short glasses, but the bottoms are typically heavier in glasses.
Now, on that particular evening of January 28, 2022, do you recall whether or not there was any sort of musical entertainment in the bar that night?
There was a band.
And do you recall the name of the band or what kind of music they played?
No.
But it was a live band, is that correct?
Yep.
And when a live band is performing at the waterfall, where is it in regard to the layout that you were just describing that band would typically set up?
When you walk into the building, it's left of the high tops. There's like a small alcove. We move tables for them.
And once the band is done, what, if anything, do you do with that space once the band clears out?
We put the tables back.
Now, with respect to the waterfall, are you familiar with whether or not there's any sort of security or camera recording in there?
There's cameras.
And as far as the cameras are concerned, do you know sort of where they're situated in relation to the bar?
For the most part, yes.
And fair to say there's at least some interior cameras and some exterior, correct?
Yes.
And with regard to this specific evening of January 28, 2022, have you had occasion to see some of that video from that particular evening?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, I would seek to introduce and admit as the next exhibit a copy of the surveillance video from the waterfall.
Okay, is there any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Okay. Thank you.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, I would ask to publish just certain small portions of that at this time.
Okay.
Now, Ms. Gilman, if I could ask for just the first video with the label as far as channel 1. If you could just pause right there. Now, Ms. Traers, what's up on the screen? Do you recognize generally what that is?
Yes.
And what are we looking at?
Waterfall parking lot.
And so this is the parking lot that you were referring to as sort of the front door that leads out to the parking lot for both the condo place and for the bar.
Yes.
And the video, as far as you're aware, is date and time stamped, and those dates and times are accurate, correct?
The
If you
date,
know.
yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks. Ms. Gilman, you can take that down. And Ms. Gilman, if I could have from channel 3, the first video associated with channel. And if you could just pause there. So Ms. Traers, before you, I think on that desk should be a laser pointer.
Mm-hmm.
So basically all you need to do with that is just click the button on top and then point it at the screen if and when I ask or anybody asks. Okay?
Okay.
So again, what's up on the screen right now, do you recognize that?
Yes.
And what do you recognize that?
The lounge area of Waterfall.
And if you could, using the laser pointer, direct the jury's attention first to that area that you were speaking about where a band would normally perform.
Let's find it right here.
And that's where the band was that night.
Yes.
And the high tops and low tops, if you could, direct the jury's attention to where those would be located.
So these are the 6 people ones, the 2 people, and then low tops.
And as far as the bar area, sort of where you would be situated within the establishment when you're working as a bartender, whereabouts, if you could, direct the jury's attention to whereabouts that would be.
All the way back here.
And sort of immediately adjacent or right in front of sort of where the bar area is, what kind of table or what, if anything, is closest to the bar?
High top.
Now, Ms. Gilman, if I could ask you to take that one down. If you could, please go to the 6th video listed down for channel 3. And if you could pause there for a second. Now, Ms. Traers, directing your attention up to the video for the, up to the screen for the video that's now up there. You recognize this to be the waterfall as well?
Yes.
The timestamp on it says 1:29:12:01. Is that the AM? Is that correct?
Correct.
And fair to say that or what if any difference do you note sort of about the lighting in this video versus the one from earlier about 10:30 p.m. or so?
This one's brighter.
And why is that?
We are getting ready to close.
So you would have turned the lights on at that point?
Yes.
And as you're closing, what are some of the sort of final things that you're doing as you're sort of closing up shop?
Cleaning up.
Ms. Gilman, if I could ask you to push this forward to about 15 minutes and 45 seconds. Ms. Traers, from the date and time stamp up there, about what time is this, does it say on the screen?
12:16 a.m.
And Ms. Gilman, if you could play this from this point till about 16 minutes and 8 seconds. Pause there just for a moment. The individual sort of walking from the top of the screen down towards the bottom, towards that front door area, is that where the front door is?
Yes.
And if, again, if you could, just for the jury, just using the laser pointer, direct their attention to where that front door is.
Right here.
And you recognize who that person was?
Yep.
Okay. Who was
Yes.
that?
That's me.
And you were basically taking the trash out, correct?
Yes.
Ms. Gilman, if you could, just run it through to that 16 over. Thank you. You can stop there, and you can take that down, Ms. Gilman. Thank you very much. Now, from that evening of January 28th, 2022, I'm going to ask just a couple of people's names and then ask if you know them or recognize them as far as sort of people that you've seen in that establishment before. Okay. First, with respect to John O'Keefe.
I know of him.
And was he someone that you had seen in the waterfall before when you were working there?
A couple times.
Did you know him specifically by name, or did you just sort of know him as a familiar face?
First name.
And what is it typically that, you know, as a bartender, what is it typically that he would sort of order or get when he was?
I couldn't tell you. Don't know.
And really, I'm just asking as far as the beer versus cocktail versus whatever else, if you know.
I'd say beer.
And do you recall seeing him in the waterfall on January 28th?
Yes.
And could you describe what, if any, interaction you had with him or when about that was in the evening?
He came up to order a beer.
And at the end of the night, there was one group that was sort of the last group to leave, is that correct?
Yes.
And where were they sort of situated in the bar?
The high top, yeah, in the lounge, closest to the bar.
And what, if any, association did you see with Mr. O'Keefe with regard to that group?
I believe he was standing with them.
Could you keep your voice up, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
And ma'am, if you want, so that microphone, you can move anywhere you want, so wherever is most comfortable. Thanks. Now, were you familiar with anybody as far as a female party that would accompany Mr. O'Keefe to the waterfall on that or prior occasions?
No.
And had you seen Mr. O'Keefe in there with or without any sort of female companionship?
Previously?
Yes.
No. Not that I'm aware of.
I'm sorry?
Not that I'm aware of.
Not that you're aware. Now, with regard to Christopher Alwood, did you know him?
I know of him.
And you're familiar with him as far as someone who came into the waterfall on occasion?
On occasion, yes.
About how often would he be in?
Once every few months.
And do you recall him on the evening of January 28th?
I actually don't remember.
And anybody, as far as anybody else from the Albert family, as far as a Brian Albert, were you familiar with him?
I know of them.
And do you recall him being there on January 28th?
Yes.
And where was he in relation to the group that was at the high top table closest to the bar?
Same area.
And who, if anyone else from that group, did you recognize or did you know on that evening?
The only people I would have recognized would be Brian Higgins and Brian Albert's wife.
And do you even know what Brian Albert's wife's name is?
I forget.
And Mr. Higgs, is that someone that you had seen in there on prior occasions?
On occasion, yes.
And as far as Mr. Brian Albert, is that someone that you had seen there on prior occasions as well?
Same, on occasion.
And had you seen Mr. Higgins and Mr. Brian Albert there together on prior occasions as well?
Yes.
I may have just one moment, John.
Okay.
Now, at some point, following that evening of January 28th, do you recall troopers from the state police coming to the waterfall, speaking with you and speaking with the owner of the waterfall?
I spoke with them, not at Waterfall.
And are you at least aware that they received from the establishment not only the video, but some receipts from that evening as well?
Yes.
And have you seen those receipts on some prior date?
One.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes.
Showing you 3-page documents, just ask in general terms, do you recognize what those appear to be?
Yes.
And obviously, you work at the waterfall, you've seen receipts that are generated by the establishment before, correct?
Yes.
Do those appear to be receipts from the waterfall?
Yep.
Is there any sort of date?
I'm sorry, was there a yes or no answer?
Yes.
Thank you.
And with respect to the receipts that I've placed before you, do they have a date on them?
Yes.
And what is the date?
1/28/22.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
Commonwealth seek to introduce and admit as the next exhibit.
Okay.
No objection.
Okay. Thank you.
I may have one moment, Your Honor.
Yes.
And Mr. Ayers, just one last question. With regard to some of the people that I had asked you about, as far as Mr. O'Keefe, Brian Albert, Brian Higgins, Christopher Albert, any of those parties that you knew them sort of exclusively through your work at the waterfall, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Nothing further, Your Honor.
All right, Ms. Giannetti?
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon.
We've never met, correct?
No.
You had been a bartender at the Waterfall for how many years?
About 7.
And that was prior to January of 2022? Or you've now been there for 7 years as of today?
As of today.
As of today. Prior to being a bartender at the Waterfall, did you have another bartending job somewhere else?
Yes.
Where was that?
I've worked at a couple places.
In what towns or cities?
A couple in Canton.
And the couple in Canton, was that immediately prior to moving to the Waterfall?
Yes.
All right. And we don't have to get into the names of them, but how many years were you a bartender in Canton prior to going to the Waterfall?
Prior to the Waterfall, about 4.
Okay. So for about the last 11 years, you've been a bartender at one establishment or another in the town of Canton, correct?
Yes,
Are you from Canton?
I am.
Did you grow up in Canton?
Yes,
And you no longer live in Canton?
I recently moved back.
Now you're back to Canton. I got you, okay. And you had, I believe, testified on direct examination that you either know or know of the Albert family, correct?
Correct.
You would agree with me that they are a well-known family in the town of Canton?
Objection.
Overruled.
Do I answer that?
Yes, you can answer. You can answer.
Said overruled, so you can.
I would say yes.
Okay. And how many members of the Albert family do you know either personally or professionally? And by professionally, I mean, obviously, you're a bartender, and personally means that you know them in some other way.
It would only be professionally, and
Okay.
I'd say 3 or the whole family of the Alberts. Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
5 of them.
Okay. And if I asked you the names of the Albert family that you know, would you be able to tell this jury?
Yes.
If you would do that, please.
There's Brian Alberts, Chris Alberts, I can't remember their wives' names
Okay.
at the moment.
You know their wives
Yeah.
by face?
Yeah, and then Brian's daughter, Caitlin.
Okay. And specifically with regard to Caitlin Albert, can you tell us, is there a difference in age between the two of you? Is she closer to your age than the others?
She's closer to my age. She's younger than me.
Okay. Did you see Caitlin Albert at the waterfall on the night of January 28th into the 29th of 2022?
Yes.
You also mentioned that you had seen somebody named Brian Higgins there, correct?
Correct.
He was somebody that you recognized prior to that day, correct?
Correct.
And how did you know or come to recognize Brian Higgins?
From Waterfall.
Did you know his name, specifically his last name, on January 28th when you were working that night?
Yes.
When did you learn his name, if you remember?
I don't remember.
At some point in the past, when he'd been in the bar, for some reason you knew his name, Brian Higgins.
Or yes.
And you had testified, I believe, on direct examination that you had seen Brian Higgins with Brian Albert at the waterfall on prior occasions.
Correct. So, Ms. Gianetti, it's time for lunch. I don't imagine you'll finish in 5 minutes, right?
It won't be too much longer than that, but it's probably good to take a break.
Okay, thank you. All right, Ms. Treyas, I'm going to ask you to come back at 2, and the jurors will take lunch.
Okay.
Whereas if you would fold and leave your notebooks on the chairs, taking your property with you, all rise, jury out, jury call.